Misfit, shit-fit children stuck in the linchpin. Crafty anthems of rebellion with Krylon cans as pins. Fuck shit up, she whispers. Fuck shit up, she whispers. These words are our delicacies. Lunch it as it rolls and relish it as it rots.
It all seems so surreal, sometimes like you've seen it in a movie. You're dying in your living room and you watch the world on TV. There's a window in your house, I'm sure. Open it up wide, stick your face out, scream your head off to the sky. I am alive! Oh, tonight we're gonna fuck shit up and do it all for love. Oh, tonight we're gonna fuck shit up and do it all for love. Oh, tonight we're gonna fuck shit up and do it all for love. Oh, tonight we're gonna fuck shit up and do it all for love.
On the wall it says non-violence. Violence against property is not violence. You guys know you can join us. You don't have to fight us, you know.
Microsoft, Boeing, Bank of America, US Bank, Fidelity Investments, all of those companies who had their shit fucked with on that day had invested in the WTO meetings, and they paid for the meetings to be in Seattle. Like those meetings cost millions of dollars. The money came from somewhere, and it wasn't the US government. The money for those meetings came from those corporations, and that's why people targeted those corporations on that day.
Here because I heard 50,000 other people were going to be here, and I figured even if they're out here protesting in a way that I don't like, advocating reform or abolition of some particular institution, at least there are 50,000 people that really care and are worked up about something, and hopefully we can come out here and give them a shove in a little more radical direction. And it's a hell of an opportunity to show that the problem with the WTO is the same problem that all the institutions that fill our lives are guilty of. There's people other than ourselves in control of our lives. They just keep getting further and further away from us and more powerful. I don't care whether they're making decisions that I like or whether I hate. The fact that they're making those decisions is unhealthy and unnatural. And so I'm hoping that we can come out here and get crazy and fuck enough shit up that every city in the world knows that it can't host a WTO. Roll back to the people of their own lives, or else that city's going to be torn to pieces.
Somos anarquistas! 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 Somos anarquistas porque ao longo do tempo temos sido vítimas de todos os tipos de governos. Toda a tirania sanguinária da história, de fanático, assassino, ditadores, despotas. Somos anarquistas, rebelde, desobediente, foda-se os mestres, líderes e deuses. Não é natural sermos explorados para que uma minoria se torne milionários. Somos anarquistas e não vamos nos calar perante as leis criadas para nos assassinar. e sufocar nosso grito de insurgência. Reage contra a tirania e inteligência.
Somos anarquistas combatendo os burgueses, suas guerras patrióticas, seus deuses. Somos anarquistas, odiamos a polícia, generais, governantes e todos os parasitas. Estamos em combate, somos anarquistas, somos anti-estado, anticapitalistas. Somos anarquistas, queremos vida digna pra todas as favelas, guetos, periferias. Somos anarquistas e pra nós é insuportável ver um povo pobre todo dia humilhado, enganados por padres, pastores, políticos que dizem que a pobreza é um castigo divino. Somos anarquistas, somos anarquistas, somos anarquistas, não tememos as ruínas. Somos anarquistas, somos anarquistas, somos anarquistas, não tememos as ruínas. Somos anarquistas, somos anarquistas, somos anarquistas, não tememos as ruínas. Somos anarquistas, somos anarquistas, somos anarquistas, não tememos as ruínas.
Somos anarquistas, foda-se o sistema. Somos a fúria, a revolta, a tormenta. Enquanto houver opressão dos bota-pretas, tortura em manicômios e cadeias, haverá luta e resistência anarquista pela abolição das prisões e o fim da polícia. Difícil, mas um dia ela vai quando os de baixo se movem, os de cima caem. Somos anarquistas inflamando o levante contra os herdeiros da Casa Grande, que hoje estão nas cortes, no Congresso, decretando o morticínio dos famélicos.
Através do poderio bélico, caneta, disseminando o terror dos bolsões de pobreza, com bombas, tanques, gases venenosos. Não há limite pra ganância dos poderosos. Dizem que a anarquia é o caos descontrolado, mas é o capitalismo que está em colapso. Criminalidade, desigualdade, violência e miséria por toda parte. Desperdício de comida e milhões de seres humanos morrendo de fome, isso é insano. Bombardeio povoados, países inteiros arrasados pela merda do poder do dinheiro. Somos anarquistas, somos anarquistas, somos anarquistas, não tememos as ruínas.
Welcome to the New York City 16 Annual Bookfair. Welcome everybody. Thank you for being here and share with us today these workshops. Yesterday was amazing, was in person in the community garden, and welcome.
Yeah, yesterday we had around 1,000 people coming in and out of the community garden on the Lower East Side. We had a lot of performance arts. It's all on Friday, the Baltic Art Festival also opened up in Gray Space, a space nearby, which we're helping coordinate, and we're working all together. And so it's really exciting to open up this year's book fair with all these performances and all these people just enjoying the space and enjoying the beautiful weather that we had yesterday. Today, we're also super, super happy to say that we can continue this book fair for one more year and present to you all these wonderful discussions, workshops, dialogues, and I hope that it can be enriching for everybody. This year's theme for the book fair, every year we have a theme, is direct action. And we hold that direct action is really important because as anarchists, we think that a revolution has already begun. In fact, we know, not as a definite moment in which we transcend from dystopia to utopia, but rather as a set of continuous acts that are carried out by revolutionaries and dreamers in all corners of the globe. And these actions are ones that are united by the will to build a world that's free from exploitation of both human and non-human life, and one that grows from the seeds embedded in the cracks of the state and fertilized by the ashes of capitalism, rebelliously nurtured also by the actions of all dreamers and revolutionaries. In the apparent absence of hope in an era dominated by climate change and pervasive fascism, racism, homophobia, many tend to turn to the state as a divine savior, as a sort of bastion of light in a crumbling world, or for statists, as a target to take over and control through violent revolution, right? But we've seen how this creates conditions as violent and as repressive as the systems claim to be overthrown. And so now we've reached a tipping point, both ecologically and socially, where there's no more room for ambiguity or for piecemeal reform. It's up to us, the dreamers of new worlds, to push forward. And through direct action, many have already started to carve out this path and experiment with new ways of life. And so we take this opportunity to extend our acknowledgement and gratitude to these people.
All our solidarity to trans, queer, and non-binary people. Our solidarity to the Black Lives Matter movement, the indigenous resistors of fascism, global warming, and cultural violence. Our solidarity to all poets, musicians, dancers, journalists, artists, activists, bikers, vegan people. All the community gardens people that provide autonomous place for ecological revolution and social healing. All hackers, anti-fascists, everywhere, political prisoners, anarchists that strike anonymously. To all frontline anarcho-feminists in continuous revolutions. For all of you who read this, listen this, and create your own new words, language, sense, space, rhythms, and dimensions, what no money can buy, because it belongs to our soul and our passion for freedom.
Thank you for coming to this year's book fair.
Thank you for
We'll start
coming and be
briefly.
here. Yeah.
Fables and Spells, presented by AK Press, performed by Adrienne Marie Brown.
This panel, this first presentation, is pre-recorded, presented to us by AK Press. It's a dialogue with Brown and Dori Midnight about Adrienne's new book, Fables and Spells, in which she brings us short stories and fiction and poetry to create new visions of a possible future. So thank you for watching.
Each workshop have a different structure for many different reasons. And we introduce how they structure for each workshop in the beginning before we start that. That Adrienne, unfortunately, cannot be here now in presence. It means no really discussion after. This is a pre-record video. And that's it.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoy.
Hi.
Hi, love. Hold on one second. There we go. Hi, Dori Midnight.
Hello, my darling. I'm so happy to be doing this with you.
I know. It feels very cool to me. I'm like, I've never gotten to actually do this thing. So, hi, Anarchist Bookfair. We are doing this conversation about a book that is coming up from me called Fables and Spells, which is a collection of short stories, fables, poetry, spells. Some of it has been published before, but it's in new relationships or new contexts with other work. And then there's a lot of new pieces. And Dori and I are going to have a conversation because she's one of my favorite witches in the world. And do you use she, her? Do you use she, they? What do you do?
I use she, her.
She, her. And Dori's going to just ask me questions about fables and spells, and I'm going to answer them. And it's going to be a witchy good time. I love this backdrop. That's gorgeous.
This is my Zoom garden.
It's great. That's so smart.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have a Zoom Octavia garden.
I mean, Zoom screens are like altars in
really
a way,
is.
right?
It's like, this is what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So I've just loved getting to dive into this book of yours. I mean, this book, this like collection of spells and fables, and feels like kind of like a recipe book, a spell book. And as I was reading it, I was really struck by like the way I can feel you drawing on multiple lineages. like I was thinking about, in the introduction, you talk a lot about like recovering a lost lineage and recovering a lineage that has been swept away, and the ways in which Christianity and patriarchy and white supremacy has suppressed and harmed our witch traditions.
Yeah.
But I was also thinking about your lineage as like the preachers in your lineage, and the way in which you're so much a liturgist, and that these writings feel both like spells, but they also really feel like psalms to me, like verses of praise, of grief, of collective and personal lament.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about this, your own process of recovering a lost lineage, and also sort of how you came to think about and understand yourself as like a spellcaster. And yeah.
I mean, juicy start. Yeah, I mean, I think there was a moment where I recognized like, oh, I don't have this direct thing that some people seem to have, where they're like, oh, my grandmother taught me to do this magic, or my grandmother showed me what my grandfather, or that my people knew this, like that. The way I was raised was very much like my parents fell in love and they're like, oh, racism, we got to take you away. And it was just a journey of like what they had pieced together. And most of that was in the lineage of Christianity. And on my mother's side, like an evangelical Christianity, which then my parents were very like, it's cool, we go to church on Sundays, we do the holidays, like, God is all around and not just in that building or structure. And I think that was really helpful, because as I started to come into like something moves in me, something's coming through me. There's something that happens when I put the words together in a certain way, that I feel changed, and I can feel change happening in the world. And even when I think I'm not writing a spell, the words come together and they have some transformational impact. And I started asking around, I was like, does anyone know, like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And what I kept finding was there was actually so many paths that would speak to me, like a piece here, a piece there, a piece there, a piece there, that I would be like, and when I say speak to me, it was like, I could feel something awaken, like down in my bones and my marrow, that would be like, yeah, that you're supposed to know about moon cycles. You're supposed to really understand and be in a deep relationship to celestial bodies. Okay, got it. Download received. That. Hi, baby dog.
The dog's howling at the moon too.
Oh, it's time. I mean, it's the week of. So, I kept having those kind of experiences, and then experiences of like, there's something about my sensuality that is supposed to be part of my magic and part of my power. And then
let me deal with this dog. Hang on a second.
Yeah. I was like, I feel like dog is like, I'm not going to wait this out.
I'm going to close this door. Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like, and then I would hear about stuff that other people were engaged in, like other deep practices. And I was like, I can feel that I'm supposed to understand that, but I can tell that my way of moving with it is not to necessarily become a direct disciple, right? But to understand and weave it together. Like whatever it is that my magic is, it's like it works at the intersections and the in-between spaces of all these different lineages. And many of them use words, like use spells, cast spells, that's one of the ways they both call in and release, and call in and release feels like what this book is up to. So the way it's structured is kind of like these different segments of the book where we're kind of calling in and releasing around different aspects of the human experience, grief, love, being in relationship to what is celestial, etc. And giving myself permission, to be like, okay, like, what if I stop trying to name myself in a lineage? And what if I just be myself in all these lineages? And I think that I'm uniquely suited to do that also because I come from an interracial and intercultural family. So most of growing up was that experience of like, what are you? There's not a clear word for you. Like some people say you're just this, and then that, you know, as soon as I would have a definition, I was like, oh, I'm this. Then people would be like, no, you're not. So I just kept being like, okay, I'm something, you know, Prince gave me. He was like, I'm something you've never seen, right? I'm like, that's all I know, right? And you know, I think the last thing I'll add into it is there's a universality to the way I do my work. So I really believe that anyone can do it. Like I think I'm like, oh, I know how to do this. I'm really called into it, and it has. When I speak it out loud, it has touches of the evangelical. When I whisper it to myself, it has touches of the shamanistic. It has all these different pieces of it. And I think that everyone has that combination that they could unlock within themselves of how to move their own magic and move their own words through. And so like, I love when people are like, oh, I cast that spell. You know, you wrote it and I cast it, or you wrote it and I riffed off of it and ended up somewhere else, which coming back to the Psalms, I think one of the ancient ways we have told story is like there's these very early stories from our human experience that get remixed and retold, right? There's a love story. There's a story with your mother. There's a story with your father. There's a story of community. There's a story of losing yourself. There's a story of finding yourself. There's a story of death. There's a story of parenting. Like there's these core stories. There's betrayal. It's like we just have these core stories and we tell them in every biblical text. We tell them in every classical literature text. We tell them over and over. And instead of being like, there's a new story, it's more like, how are we telling the story for our time? How are we casting the spells for our time that help us deal with these kind of necessary human experiences, right? So that we can make a future in which we get to still have human experiences. That's one thing I'm really interested in.
Yes. Yeah, I'm thinking about, you know, the phrase abracadabra, you know, the sort of like magical incantation, which is like, you know, become pretty silly, but it's actually, you know, the root of the word is Hebrew and Aramaic, and it means I create as I speak.
Yes.
And I'm just thinking about like that, you know, the magic of the word, the magic of letters, and how you're talking about like pulling letters and words together to create something, and how that has this impact that creates our future.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about, I think, you know, as both, you know, I also am a person who like doesn't label myself, but often gets labeled.
Yeah.
And I don't mind people calling me a witch. It's just like, but I'm also, you know, I went to seminary. I'm like a theologian, and I draw on my own ancestral traditions of Judaism. And I'm like, I was struck as I was reading about like, and this is something I think about a lot, like the difference between a spell and a prayer.
Yes.
And as I was reading your book, I was thinking about, you know, I was doing some other reading about like, well, what do other people think of spells? And I found this like Christian online who was like, spells are degenerated prayers. Which I was like, I thank you. I will take that. But I was thinking about how naughty prayers, dirty prayers. But I was also thinking about how spells are kind of like undomesticated prayers, actually, right? They're wild and they're spontaneous, and they have to do with bending will and bending time and being like in collaboration with everything. But then I really can feel the intersection for you of also like drawing on something like collaborating with source, collaborating with all the elements, collaborating with the unseen for change, right? Like there's directive in it. And I think that's true too about the fables that you're telling, right? Like the idea that they're not just short stories, but they're fables. They have directive, they have instruction, they have guidance. So they have this like kind of medicine quality to it. So, and then I was just thinking about how like person who writes fables is called a fabulist, which is like the best name.
I hope someone realizes that.
Oh yeah. Oh no, we are now adding that to your many titles.
Putting it into my bio.
Yeah, fabulous, Adrienne Marie Brown. So I'd love to,
Yeah.
you're fabulous, fabulous. So I'd love to hear you talk about sort of like some of the ways in which you see like the instruction, the guidance that's contained in these fables. And before you start, I'm just going to deal with this dog and then we're in. This is collaboration with all the species. Who is
this little dog?
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, I want to be known. I'm a part of
this. This dog wants to be part of this conversation. All right.
Yeah, I love this question. So I love you said that there's the directive and the directness. Direct has actually been a big part of my claiming this capacity. So that I was raised in a Christian, non-denominational kind of Christian pathway, and so it was normalized to me that there's always someone between you and God, right? Like that there's someone else who understands God and is telling you what God wants you to know, and then that you are talking to when you're like, I don't understand. And then that your prayers are specifically like, God, can you give me this? If it's your will, can you make it happen? Right. Mm-hmm. And there was something else that started to emerge in me, which at first it did feel degenerate. I was just like, oh no, what am I thinking? But it felt also true, which is I think I could have a direct relationship with God. And I think that I am God's will. Like I am God's will personified. And that's what existence is. And, I was reading Octavia Butler. So her whole thought is God is the force of change that is moving in the world. And rather than thinking of it as a sentient white man sitting on a throne somewhere giving out blessings like Santa Claus, instead we could think of it as this sacred force that all of us are in a relationship with and all of us are shaped by, and it's beyond our comprehension. That's a huge part for me of spellcasting and fable writing and prayer, and like any sacred work I do is the largest picture is beyond my comprehension. And I humble myself to that, right? That I'm like, I don't know why this is happening in this way. I don't know why millions of people are dying in this particular way. I don't know why violence is so persistent amongst us. I don't know those things. But I see that that's true. And there's some sacred balancing that's beyond my comprehension that's always playing out. Inside of that, I also have felt what happens when I claim my direct relationship with that force, that holy force, that I have been able to contribute to miracles. I have been able to contribute to healing that was beyond any scientific understanding of what was possible in a given moment. I have been able to contribute to waves of humanity making changes of their circumstance. None of it have I been able to do alone, but by being in relationship with other people willing to be direct creators of change, makers of change. And there's something about moving out of the audience, like for me physically, sitting in the audience of a sacred space, right? Or even being the person who's like, I'm the one person up front in the sacred space telling the audience something, which I've tried on all those different roles. There's something about moving and being like, actually, I'm a storyteller amongst storytellers in a circle. And we're all telling the story of the future in our different ways. So you tell it, you put your spells into these little bottles, which are always near me, right? And so like right now, I'm like, I want to cast a spell to increase the pleasure of this moment. And then that spell is cast. You cast it a long time ago. I receive it. It's delicious and it works. And I'm in relationship with all these other people who cast spells in different ways. And the directness, I also feel like when I talk to other poets or other songwriters or other people who work the way I do, something is being given to you and your sacred work is also to receive it, right? so that there's a directness of reception that feels like it's taken me a long time to understand, like, that's my most holy work. Like, I very rarely set out and be like, I'm going to write this. And every time I try to do that, like when I make a commitment, like I'm going to do a weekly column or something, I'm like, oh no, like I'm trying to push the Ouija board, you know, I'm trying to push something into existence that's not ready, you know. I'm like trying to be Pitocin to my own labor process or whatever, right? And instead it's like, I actually work best when I just make tons of space and room to receive. And then what comes is better than anything I could have thought of or constructed, you know, like if I was trying to build it or make it. And being a good receiver also means like, oh, some raw materials coming. How do I make it as beautiful, as delicious, as accessible, as receivable? You know, like how do I be a good channel of it coming through? And I think that's maybe my primary magic actually, is that I'm like, oh, I can hear something that's happening in the world in a given moment, and I can like move it through my body in such a way that it comes out as like, oh, there's something to sing right now. And it's like, oh, that's a pretty way that you're singing about grief, right? And I'm like, but we're all feeling the grief, and actually it's beautiful to feel grief because it means we love something. I can make that clear, something like that. But the directness feels like the important piece that, and I hope that that's one of the things that people take away from this collection, is an invitation into their own direct relationship with that larger source beyond comprehension, and that it can show up on a lot of different ways. Like I'm constantly astounded. I also am astounded by the ways that it doesn't work for me, or like the ways that it doesn't work for other people. Like my sister, I think we've talked about this on our podcast, where she's like, I am not a witch, because when I try to cast spells, it always backfires and everything is worse, right? So she's like, I do have other magics, and I'm really good at other manifestations, but that's not the one for me. And I'm like, oh, that's helpful. Let me stop being like, girl, just cast a spell. Because I'm like, no, don't cast a spell. Don't do it. Right. So it's also figuring out like, or don't cast a spell in this particular way. Right. Yeah. And I feel like that's also important to be like, I think everyone has some juice, but it's figuring out like, are you pineapple, you orange, you something else? You know, I'm a cocktail. Not everyone's a cocktail, but you know, what is yours?
Yeah.
Actually, one more thought is occurring to me here, which is also, there's something about power in all of it that I want to name, which is like the directness is also part of, I think, what is most terrifying to the existing power structures is when you say like, I don't want an electoral college, and I don't want an interlocutor, and I don't want even a pastor or a preacher. I don't want any of those things. I want to directly engage in the governance of all the decisions that have to do with my body and my community. And I want to directly engage in creating the conditions that will work for my people to live into the future. And I want to directly engage in being in a relationship with this earth that is my home. That terrifies these structures that have put themselves in between us and said, all the power has to come through me, right? Which is, I feel important to say at the Anarchist Bookfair. It's just sort of like, that's the piece of anarchy that has always felt the most like home to me, is like, we want a direct relationship with our lives, and we don't want to prescribe what the outcomes of that are going to look like, because it's something that would come from being in direct relationship and being free to make the decisions together, you know? And it feels very chaotic to people who are used to living in the systems, right? But I still think it's actually the way we're meant to be with each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, I mean, I think about like when I think back to Deep Time and the projects of patriarchal religions and like establishing these intermediaries as part of the project for like maintaining, preserving, serving like a concentration of male power, right? Yes. And how that creates this investment in people not having a direct relationship with mystery, right? And also not only not having a direct relationship with mystery, but being like let us define mystery. Let us try to contain mystery.
Yeah.
Let us create images of mystery that will serve this project of patriarchy, of power over, of, you know, and then of course that like rolls into capitalism and racism and, you know, the ways in which these institutions, these structures weave together and support each other, you know. And so that the magic of breaking through those, like what's trying to be an intermediary between us and mystery, and also being like, not only do we not want you to petition for us or define it, we also don't want mystery contained. We don't want mystery defined, you know, and like to live in the chaos. And I love in this book, like you are not just in direct conversation with divinity, with God, but like with celestial bodies. You directly address the moon multiple times. You talk to Earth. You know, it feels like your, like the dimensionality of your net, of the web that you like are transmitting through is like mycelial, celestial, ancestral. It like is through all the dimensions, and then it comes through you and all the practices that you do to keep yourself in clear receptivity, you know. And another word for that, like to borrow from these traditions that I'm in relationship with, you know, I like is prophet, you know, which is, and I'm really like, I teach a lot about the prophet Miriam, you know, who was Moses's sister, who was wild. She was like in direct relationship with God. She was in direct relationship with water. You know, I thought about Miriam a lot in reading your book because of how present water is.
Yes.
And I've been reading these Black liberation theologians who actually talk about like what would Judaism and Christianity and Black liberation theology look like if we drew from Miriam's tradition rather than Moses's tradition? Because, you know, Moses left Egypt and then emulated hierarchy. He was like, let's just set up another thing where I'm in charge.
Totally.
Right. And Miriam was like, literally challenged him. And then he sent her out of the camp. She was in the wild. Yes. She was like, don't we all have, and her question to Moses in the book of Exodus is, aren't we all prophets? Aren't we all prophets?
Exactly.
And so I'm really into this reclamation of the word prophet, of being like, as someone, as you were saying, who like receives and then transmits, and is receiving collective need, collective prayer, experiencing the collective grief, and then offering up remedy, offering guidance, offering vision, offering like doing otherwise, right? And so, and I think like this idea, like I think patriarchy has then taken the word prophet and turned it into like an intermediary, another intermediary, rather than what I feel like you're saying, which is like
awaken this.
Like you're like, I'm a prophet to be like, aren't we all prophets? Like I really see you asking that same Miriam question of like, I'm doing this and we all have access to it. Just tap into the web in your own way, and whatever your strand is, like it may not be spell casting, it may be talking directly to the moon, it may be writing on leaves, it may be you know, and like the way that you also address the ancestors, you address, like you talk to Octavia, you talk to Harriet, you talk to Fred Hampton, you talk to Toni Morrison. Like there's also the ways in which it's like feeling the divinity through these ancestors. And I just like, I'm really moved by this idea of prophetic imagination as part of liberation work, and how you bring that forth.
Ooh, so much came up as you were saying that, and I want to speak to like three different things, which are contradictions, and then being a prophet, and then what prophetic imagination has to do with awakening responsibility. So the first piece is this contradictions piece, because one of the things that has made it so that I'm like, oh, I dance with organized religion in a certain way, where I'm like, I don't reject it as something that needs to exist, or I don't reject like understanding why it came to exist. The deep need we have for belonging and the deep feeling we have that we are in a sacred world, it's met often for people in that space of organized religion where it's like, I need to belong to somebody who has a sacred narrative for what's happening. And I think the issue we run into is when that space starts to deny our contradictions, deny our complexity, deny the existence of all these other pathways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I'm like, oh, no, there's no one single story for humanity that can be true for everyone, right? We live inside of this contradictory, complex world where many people are developing many stories, many pathways. And I think being queer was one of the first places where I was like, can you hold a contradiction of me? Right? No, you can't. Because I'm like, God made us in their image. That's one of the first things I was taught, is that we are in the image of God, right? And the idea then that any human or any creature is not in that image, that means that we have a God that can be all these images. That's actually the abundance of God, is that God is all of these things. And the first contradiction is when people are like, God made me in his image, but not you, woman, not you, black person, not you, queer person, not you, whatever else, right? I'm like, the thing you have to do in your mind in order to believe that is, I think it's literally damaging to the relationship that we have to the sacred. I think it damages it. And so right now, I think we're living inside of centuries of that damage, being able to root and rend and harm, so that we have these folks who are so disconnected from the sacred, and so sure that their way is the only way, that they're killing everyone. And it's happening at many levels, right? The individual active shooter level, the nation state that is constantly at war, the forces of discipline and power of policing that are keeping people safe. So when we talk about like even abolition, it's like what we need to abolish is that very misunderstanding of what our sacred bodies are, what the sacred is, that is actually in all of us. So you don't have to, there's no dominance to it, right? And so that first piece of like the only way humans will actually get to be compatible with this earth is if we can actually embrace all the contradictions, the contradictory ways that we exist. And everyone who can accept those contradictions, I think will be able to find a place in the future here. And those who can't, I feel like, will either make us all extinct, or they will make us, the vast minority of creatures on the planet, So all that feels prophetic to me, to name that, to be able, like, I can see that. And Lamarad Owen, who is a spiritual teacher that I adore, he came and did an interview with myself and my sister and with Angel Kyoto Williams, Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, a few years ago. And he gave me this prophet concept too. He was like, yeah, I'm calling myself a prophet because it just means I'm able to speak the truth, right? Like, that's what it means to be the prophet, is like, I'm speaking the truth. And that was the first time I was willing to accept it, because people would be like, Adrienne's a prophet. And I'd be like, like, because I'm really, I feel really conscious of both the the image that always comes to me is from Lord of the Rings, like where she's like, it's too powerful, like, like where she's just like, it's just, I always think of that, right? Where it's like that power, it distorts you, right? Like there's something that gets distorted when people place you on a pedestal, or when you end up in too much power, when that drives you, right? And so
it comes with like a lot of projections too.
Tons of projections. Right. Even my small dips into it, it's like it can be very lonely very quickly. Like after my first round of like even being visible, not even people being like a prophet, but just like, ooh, everyone's looking at me. I was like, ooh, I need to tighten my circle, deepen my circle, just make sure I have real people around me at all times who can still be unimpressed by my behavior.
Totally.
Who can still just be like, girl, what the fuck is he doing? Like that has been very important to me, that I have a close circle of people who are like, that doesn't mean you are not a prophet, right? But I'm also surrounded by prophets. Like I am surrounded by people who are constantly speaking the truth and teaching me, and we're all doing that together. And then my job, because of the set of gifts that I was given, is to also sing that prophecy and also to project that like I have my gift is a voice gift, right? So it's on the page or it's through my body, but it's like that's the gift I have. So that's also what I mean, where I'm like, everyone has aspects of this, but some people, their prophetic work is like with their family at the dinner table, being able to speak the truth there about what are we doing, what do we actually care about, what are we committed to, what are the contradictions that we are letting ride, you know, like being willing to go do that work. Some people's prophetic work is in their organization or workspace. Some people's prophetic work is parenting and being able to speak the truth to their children so that those children can come into the world more prepared to be a part of shaping it. So those two pieces, then I think all of that leads into this sacred responsibility, right? That once you see what is, once you're willing to speak what is, and once you're able to see like, oh, the contradictions are what make us so fun and delightful as a species, right? That we're not boring because we have all these contradictions, you know, like no one is just good. No one is just bad. Like that's just not how we're structured. We're at this mixy place. But I think the only people that will survive, or the only way we will survive, is if we're willing to take responsibility for what we know, responsibility for what we see and feel and hear. And my mentor, Grace Lee Boggs, you know, that's one of the things she often talked about is like, how do we get people to take responsibility for being in community? And so much of what I feel now, and so much of like the prophecy that moves in me, and so much of what is in this book is challenging even my own desire to pull apart, to individuate, to be like, I just am by myself in the world. And it's like, anytime I'm feeling or thinking that, that's a lie, right? That I have to discount all the people who are contributing to my life in order to believe that story. And then I never feel safe, right? Like there's no safety in that total aloneness. And so then challenging myself to be like, what does it mean to knit myself into community as an introvert witch who wants to go live in the woods and be a hermit? You know, I don't want to do tons and tons of community group activities. That's never been my way. I overrode my solitary nature for a long time. Now I'm deeply indulging it. Like I'm like, I live alone. I have a tortoise in the backyard. I have my whole house set up as a writing retreat. It feels like I'm in a little cottage in the woods a lot of the time. And then when I'm ready for humans, you know, I don't want any small talk humans around me. I only want people where I'm like, can we talk about God and the entire earth and the whole future and like magic and blackness? And then those are the only people I spend time with. And it's great. Right. And I'm leaving myself, but I'm like, I feel responsible for holding this position because it's a sacred existence. Like I am a sacred existence. This way of being also exists. And I'm like, oh, how do I serve my community from here? Right. So a lot of it's funny, a lot like people use social media for lots of different things. And at my best, I'm really trying to subvert the individuating and conflicting nature of social media and trying to use it as a space for prophecy, use it as a space for uplifting, use it as a medicinal space. I very intentionally try to uplift things that are like, this will either bring you joy or point you towards some solution or point you towards something that you can do or improve your day. like this is what I was like, there's another path for our species and it's not that way, it's over this way, you know?
Yes.
And I try to be responsible in all these different ways. And I think I want more people to do that, just to be like, I'm responsible. Like whatever comes next for humanity comes through me. Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, that's how I relate to social media too, is like this space, this is an altar. These are spells and, don't fuck it up. Don't waste it. Don't throw it around. Don't, and I can feel that. I mean, both in like, and what I hear you saying is like, it's like in everything that you do, and everything that you do is also like taking care of the channel that you are, is
it's
tending
like
to,
right?
Yeah.
Like there's, I keep thinking of that as like, for me, I think of the word integrity, that, I did somatics, somatics for 10 years. I was like in deep training around somatics. And there was this idea of integrity between like what you're actually feeling inside and how you actually are, and then what comes out of your mouth. And that people can really feel when there's a vast difference between like how you're feeling inside and what comes out of your mouth, right? Which I feel on the internet constantly. You know, people coming on and being like, I feel great, and you can feel that they don't feel great, or I'm furious about this. And I'm like, you don't really care. Like, you're posting about this, saying that you're furious, and then 2 minutes later, your attention is going to be 100% somewhere else. And like, if you were furious, you would do something about this thing. And because so many of us articulate fury that we don't act on, we end up in this condition where we're like, why is nothing changing? It's like, because we're not taking it to the streets. We're not, if we were furious, we would disrupt business as usual. Furious people with rage, actually stop systems of harm from harming. But we're not furious. We're overwhelmed. We are maybe feeling powerless. We may be feeling a lot of grief. We're being disconnected from each other. We're being pit against each other. We're feeling isolated. We're feeling hopeless. And so part of my work is to be like, can we be honest? Can we have integrity about what we're actually feeling, which is like, shit is not working. You know, the things that we have been trying are not working. And then I try to insert into that. That doesn't mean nothing is working. Here are some things that are working. They're much smaller scale. They're much more intimate. They take consistent daily practice of work, you know, and they're amazing, you know? So I only uplift projects that I'm like, I can vouch for this shit. I really can vouch for it, that like these small experiments are actually working. And then I feel like I have integrity. I'm not just being like, you know, fuck it up. You know, I'm like, here's specifically how people are doing the most strategic fuck ups, you know, like whatever it might be. Right. And I also think that we're in a time of humility, and having integrity about humility is really hard, right? Because there's the performance of being humble. And then there's the actual experience of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what we need to do. I don't know. And I feel like I'm looking around at a lot of other leaders right now who I trust, and that we're all looking at each other like, so far it seems that mostly we have to feel this and then act from what we're feeling. And that's a lot less clear than like a overarching strategy.
Right.
But it yields really amazing results. Like sitting with people and being like, I'm terrified of what's happening right now. And I hope we make it. I hope we want to make it through this. There's something so much more comforting to me to be like, to say, I don't know. We don't know.
Yes.
And then the mycelial answers, right? For me, what happens is then something small and connective is always up there under it all. Like, I read this poem. Let me see if I can find it. Yesterday, well, someone read this poem to me. I think it's just right for this because it's called The Witch Grass. Do you know this? Louise Gluck. Okay. I'm going to read this to you because it was like so banging. It was read during Pandemic Joy yesterday. Okay, it's called Witchgrass. Something comes into the world unwelcome, calling disorder, disorder. If you hate me so much, don't bother to give me a name. Do you need one more slur in your language, another way to blame one tribe for everything? As we both know, if you worship one God, you only need one enemy. I'm not the enemy, only a ruse to ignore what you see happening right here, in this bed, a little paradigm of failure. One of your precious flowers dies here almost every day, and you can't rest until you attack the cause, meaning whatever is left, whatever happens to be sturdier than your personal passion. It was not meant to last forever in the real world, but why admit that when you can go on doing what you always do, mourning and laying blame, always the two together? I don't need your praise to survive. I was here first, before you were here, before you ever planted a garden, and I'll be here when only the sun and moon are left and the sea and the wild field. I will constitute the field. Oh, man. I was like, what? This is what I'm talking about. Is I'm like, there's, when you talk about being humble, which also all these major religious pathways also talk about, but don't know how to practice. But I'm like, the humble is the grass, it's the weeds, it's the mycelium,
Yes.
it's underground, it's these little roaches and gnats and bees and sparrows. Like, they're chilling, right? Or if they're not, it's them trying to figure out how to survive us. And they will. They will. Nature, the earth will always survive us, right? Her only threat is the sun. That gives me peace, right? Because it's not even a threat relationship. It's just sort of like, in the same way everything dies, eventually she will die. Long time from now, we don't have to worry about that. All we have to worry about is ourselves. And that's so much, that's so humbling, right? It's just like, okay, as a species, can we survive here? Can we survive the things we're changing in terms of her nature? And I love that. I love that reframe of a question, because I'm like, okay, what do I know about surviving and changing conditions on this earth? And who is it I need to survive with and co-evolve with that makes it worth surviving? Right? Like, I'm in relationships with people who I'm like, I want to live just to see your face again and get to hear your laugh again and to have more conversations with you. That's my reason for living right now. It's like the beautiful relationships I'm in. There's no accolade that I need at this point in my life. Like, it's really relational. And again, that's the invitation for people. It's like, are you in relationships that make you want to grow and evolve and be better? And like, are you in relationships that show you? I went to have dinner with my friends Courtney and Joey Lou yesterday. They live out in the country here in North Carolina, and they in a year have built this massive garden out in the country that is just like magic land, and everything is growing in that garden. And they were like, we can come help you figure out, I've got like one little garden bed. And I'm like, I'm overwhelmed. The collard greens have gone wild. I don't know what to do. I don't think this is my magic. They're like, okay, but we could just show you like basic shit to do. Like, don't you want to know how to basic garden? And I was like, I do. I want to know how to basic garden.
You got
like
this.
I can basically keep plants alive now. That was a huge, huge threshold to cross for me. And now I want to try to support the outside plants as well. Humble. It's a humble, it's a different path, but it's like, no matter how bombastic other shit is in your life, you still need to have that basic skill.
Yeah. And gardening is such a humbling activity because
someone else is going to eat it. I mean, we'll just see what happens,
There's that, and it's just like you put a seed in the ground and it's like you actually really didn't do anything.
You didn't do anything.
Like it is witnessing the miracle and you get to be in relationship with that. And I think like like and that relational aspect. Also, you're talking about love, like being in love with your people, being in love with life, being in love with what's around you, and that being such like an animator and a motivator for us to, and in order to feel that love, we have to feel everything. And so how do we make space for the feeling and not just like, that's the invitation. It's like, there's no shame in, I think like what you're saying about social media is like, it's, how does this also be a site, and how do we be sites? How do we be occasions for that love? How do we be invitations for that love? And I find this book of yours, it is such a sacred realignment. Like I could feel how this book is going to be one of those books that, like the way that we are, in Jewish tradition, you are directed to read a psalm every day. There's a psalm for Monday through Sunday, there's a psalm for every day. There's a psalm for different holidays. There's a psalm for different occasions.
I love that.
And it's really, to me, it's like, it's about alignment. It's about like, it is so easy. We all fall out of alignment, right? It is so easy to fall out of alignment. And so what are the practices that realign you with life, that realign you with love, that realign you to what's important and purpose? And, I feel like the fables do a realigning. Like they're very like, I was like, oh, this is a chiropractic book. Like this is a body work book. This is an altar book. This is a book that, and I've used some of your writing in services that I've led. I've used them as Psalms, like in the month, and there's a certain month where you're supposed to say Psalm 27 every day. And I love that for the Anarchist Book Fair, we're like getting deep into like, we're like, guess what? We're going to talk about God, anarchists, because we are, listen, we're all for fucking shit up, but it's like, we're going to talk about God here.
Yeah, God's fucking
so Psalm 27 is the one that's like, God is my rock, I will not fear, all that. And the piece of writing that I think is your Psalm 27. This is just like my theologian mind is I'm not afraid of what I came here to do. I'm made of stardust. We are not afraid of what we are called now to do. We are all made of God.
Yeah.
And I think about that, there's this Jewish teaching, there's rabbi who is this like teaching, thousands of years old, where he says, you're supposed to keep 2 pieces of paper in your pocket. In one pocket, you write your dirt, your dust, you will return to dust, you're nothing. And in the other pocket is like, there's no one like you.
Yeah.
You are the only you are here to do amazing things. And I think like, so the idea is like, you'll always need to look at one of those.
Yes.
And I think about that in terms of like this, like what you're talking about of this balance of humility, which is also like, you are stardust, which means we're all stardust. We're all sparks of the divine.
Yes.
So we're all nothing. We're all sparks, And so like the times when we need to pull something out and be like, we're all prophets. What are you here to do? What's your prophetic work?
Yes.
And the time when it's actually really, when it's comforting to be humbled, like you just can be earth. You can watch flowers and plants grow like other people. You can look to other people and pull this book off the shelf to be like, I'm going to read this part that says like, I'm going to read this liturgy for grief, this liturgy to help me realign, like I'm thinking about the future shaping spell, the great mystery, the one-liners for the full moon. And then specifically, I'm thinking about that authenticity chant, which is really like a great daily practice, it's just really like, good. Let me just love myself all over myself, love me all over the place. Yeah. Yes. And just like having these practices that are resonant and liberatory in a daily way.
Yes.
That help us, like, it is so much about being like the way that liberation is a process, that this sacred practices are a process. And like how much of that is like being in relationship with mystery, which means not fucking knowing, and not pretending to know, which is like where the magic is.
I mean, it's also, it's built into the structure of us, right? Part of why it was so important to me to have a book that was like grief and love are the 2 kind of bookends of life. It's like, if there's anyone who was better than anyone else, they wouldn't die, right? Like whatever happens during the course of your life, you go back to the dirt. You either go in a cremated form, or you are kept in a box, and then you eventually go back to the dirt that way, or something else. Like, but we die. And the corporeal form, this body piece is like so sacred for this phase of our experience. And then it's a mystery beyond that, right? There's theories, very strong theories, lots of really good ideas, lots of good ideas, and even faith about what happens, and feeling, right? Like, I'm like, I have strong feelings of specific presences having come to visit me when they were dead, dead in the way that I understand death, which might just also be the universe coming to comfort me. It might be God has changed coming to comfort me. It might be something else. It might be something I have created for my own comfort. We don't know, right? I love the idea that it's actually my grandmother, but that might be produced by my need for my grandmother, shaping the very energy around me into something that feels like her comfort. Like, I love all the possibilities of that, because all of it means that love is that powerful, that we want to connect. We want to connect with what's living and what's dead. I love that. But there's something just, it's like no matter what you do in your life, this has actually helped me publish. this has helped me publish things, because I'm like, I could either wait and keep trying to get everything perfect and never publish anything, which is a tendency I have. You know, that was an early tendency. It was like, I have to get it right. And getting over that tendency, because I was like, I don't know, I'm going to die. I don't know I'm going to die. And I have these ideas in my head, and I've got these things pouring through, and actually they're plentiful and they change over time. You know, I can look back at what I was writing in 2003 and just be like, oh, little baby Adrienne, like, look at you. You really thought you knew what the fuck was going on. And like, you didn't, but isn't it so sweet that you were, you know, so earnest about the whole thing? And that earnestness is its own divine practice. Like the earnestness that we have as young people, like we know what to do. It's sacred. It's divine. So much change pours through that place. And it's also a blessing when we get to outlive that place and move into the next phases where we're like, ooh, I don't know. I can't protect my children. I can't protect my parents. I have to caretake everyone in every direction. I've got to be in this. Like there's no quick overnight revolutionary solution. It's revolution as an everyday practice of what I choose to do in relationship to the people around me. Oh, you know, that's also a great phase. And then I also am grateful I've gotten to see like elders in my life who are just sort of like, yeah, I truly don't know anything. And what I do know is I'm really happy you're sitting right here with me right now in my presence. Every elder, every grandparent, everyone that I've gotten to witness truly reach old age. It's just like, I know the contentment of the present moment. And wow, I want to make sure to tell you about that. I'm like, great. So we see this arc play out over and over again. And as a species, I think we're in the young place, right? Like, even though everyone, you know, lots of people have gotten old, but I'm like, I am so hopeful that as a species, the next phase we enter into is like, okay, we don't know. We have to focus on taking care. And then we can move through that into like, oh, the whole thing is about being content with this miraculous experience while we're in it. You know, that would be bomb, right? Because then we're in the cycle. We have accepted the cycle of humanity, you know, and ours is a unique cycle, you know, like other things live and die, but they don't seem to have such angst and, you know, phases to it, right? They're just like caretaking mostly. So maybe all the other species are just way ahead of us too, you know? I love that idea. But I'm feeling like in my own life, 43 years has gotten me to this place where I'm like, I want to focus on the contentment and caretaking most of all as revolutionary activities, you know? And I'm interested in what the Anarchist Bookfair feels about that and thinks about that, because I do see that also in my anarchist communities, is that I'm like, a lot of the mutual aid and a lot of the other pieces are emerging in those spaces. I think, I think that sense of like, actually we are responsible for each other. That's part of what flows amongst us. And it's good news. That's good. I think that's for the best of us.
Yeah. And it's like life serving life, you know, like I think it's like these acts of love and like once we feel into the connection and feel that care isn't what comes next. Like actually tending to each other, feeding each other, you know, holding each other's babies, holding each other's hands through death, you know, that would just naturally arise out of us, and that it's that's built into us too.
Exactly. Yeah. And in a given day, I think about that. In a given day, I want to live the full range from deep meditation to deep action. You know, in each day I'm trying to figure out like how to live that cycle within my own day. So I'm pushing myself to be in more relationship, you know, and I'm pushing myself to not forget my meditation. You know, because I'm like, oh, and then I sit down and I do it, and it's like, oh, that was better. Everything's better now. You know, like it's just.
I mean, it's so hard to do. Yeah,
it is,
I mean,
but, you know, I also have stopped trying to act like I'm one of these people who's going to sit for hours and hours and hours. Like, I'm an Aries rising. It's just not happening for me. So, but what happens is, like, if I give myself a really solid 10 minutes, 20 minutes at a time, and some days I'll do these retreats. I just kind of create a retreat for myself where I do 30-minute sits, you know, back, kind of like take a break, walk, do another one, take a break, and do some yoga, do it. And I'm like, this is very satisfying for me. So even that small is all there. It's like, if I just construct, if I build more time in for the shorter experiences of this, I actually end up having very meaningful and grounded invitations to be in the present moment each day.
Yeah. It sounds like for you, it really widens your capacity for action and for relationship with humans. And
yes. Yeah. Like it's almost like that, you know, I feel like when people say, like, put your oxygen mask on first, like, we need to be a lot more precise about what that actually means. Like, what it feels like when you actually get a deep breath, when you're like, I was scared that I wasn't going to have one. And I was, you know, coming from scarcity, and like my whole day was rooted in scarcity, and there's just no time and no effort and no breath. And then you actually get a full dose of freaking oxygen. It's just like, this shit's just available all the time. Like serotonin, the moon, the sun, and oxygen are all just there.
Yeah.
Okay. So why am I tripping? And then from that place, then I'm like, oh, from a place of deep breath, so much more is available to me. I can notice more about my environment.
Yeah.
You know, I can see who actually needs my support. Which is a big part of my life right now, is healing from codependency patterns and really shifting into, like, who actually needs my support, not my rescue, not my martyrdom, not my overextension, but like who just like needs me to witness, and who needs me to financially support, you know, who needs me to listen. Yeah. Without being like, I've got it all. I've got all your answers figured out.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, I feel like what you're saying is, especially around like the putting your oxygen mask on first, but also like creating this space to listen more deeply, to listen wider, to listen for yourself, and to like listen to what's actually, rather than like always being in reaction and response to what's loudest or what's patterned in you. And so like doing practices that create like an actual deep listening, you know, which for you, like, you know, since your prophetic gift is voice, like 90% of that is actually listening, right? Like you have the voice, it's mostly listening. And, you know, and I, you know, for sure in my work, like identify as a deep listener, like that is my work, is listening. And there's so many ways to listen, but I think like, I don't know, it's just like, I'm thinking about like the end of your book, the very end, you have a very loose guide of how to make a spell, right? And I have an Aries Taurus Sun, so I have that boss in me. And I'm also I'm also like a total anarchist, and I'm just sort of like, you know, all of my years as doing healing work, like people are always like, how do I make a spell? How do I make a potion? How do I make an essence? How do I do this? How do I do it? You know, and I really just like, I loved your direction, because I feel like my answer for that often is like, I love not having answers. I love, like, you know, I was also raised, I went to Hebrew school 3 days a week, and we are a people who like love a question. Question begets question. There's no answers. It's one of the things I love about Judaism, is like, it's actually not about answering anything. So I'm into questions, and questions as like sacred practice, and questions as sacred offering. And being in like communal question together. So, and I love that you're like, okay, here is this book, 300 pages of spells and fables, and here's these like 3 paragraphs on how you make your own spell. And what you begin with is, at least the way I read it, was like, you begin with desire. right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
begin with desire. You
Feel the
begin
longing in you.
feel the longing. And that is also how I work, where it's like, actually, and I'm thinking about that with like a meditation practice. Like, how do we really also make space and listen for our longing and not rush the longing, like not rush through that longing to be like, I'm going to answer it, or I'm going to give myself that, or I'm going to indulge it, or I'm going to shut it down and foreclose upon it because I know I'm going to not get what I want, or I'm going to immediately feel the grief that like I have and the scarcity that comes with my longing, but actually like feel the longing and how like that's how you make a spell. That is how you make a spell, is you experience the longing and then you move from there.
That's right.
And just like thinking about like, it sounds like also that's how you move through your day of like, what is it? Where's the longing going to bring me next? Is it going to bring me into like quiet contemplation? Is it going to bring me to my friend's garden? Is it going to bring me to, have to sit down and channel? Is it going to bring me to like something delicious I'm going to put in my mouth?
Yeah.
Is it going to bring me to like cook some food for someone who is sick? Like where is the actual longing rather than the pattern, the reaction, the scarcity? And I just like, I guess for our last question, or I don't know how much time we actually have here.
No, I think we are there.
We're like starting to close. I would love to just ask you about because people are going to want to know, like, how do I make a spell?
Yeah.
Your guidance around that, your wisdom around that.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the reflection you just offered, right? That this longing piece and then feeling the questions, like what are the things you don't know or have questions around, and then what is the longing you have? Like somewhere in that dance is probably your spell that you need to cast. And I think there's also something for me around demystification, right? That it's like, it's always important to me that I'm like, this is how I do it. Mm-hmm. And it's organic, it's intuitive. Like, this is what I have figured out for how to do it. Having been cut off, again, like having the lineages that might have told me a way to do this cut off, and still having the power in my hands. Like, I can still feel it flowing through me. So here's what I've come up with so far as a way to do it. And for me, that demystification of like, well, I'll just tell a story. I had someone recently who I was having conflict with. I didn't really know this person, but we're in proximity to each other in this neighborhood, and we were having conflict. And we moved through that conflict, not in the way I wanted us to. Like, I was like, let's process. And they were just like, no, it's done, right? And so a while later, and like just a few weeks ago, they came by to help me out with something in the house. And they're like, by the way, I'm spiritual. You didn't know that about me because we were like in conflict so quickly, but I'm actually quite spiritual. And it was such a wonderful reveal moment, because it's someone who I would not necessarily have read that way, especially not with the way things went between us. But it was also kind of awesome to be like, you're right, I totally did not see that in you, but that doesn't mean it's not true. And I think that often, like, especially in these past few weeks, as I've been moving through the world, and I'm like, this person is wearing a t-shirt that seems to express the exact opposite political beliefs from me, right? Mm-hmm. But that person's casting a spell, right? That person is producing an energy. They're putting words and intention behind it. We're currently living definitely inside several massive systemic spells that even as we awaken and we're like, hey, that's not true. Whiteness is not superior. Hey, that's not true. Men are not superior. They shouldn't be in charge of our body. It's like there's awakening happening. It's like in part we're awakening from what I think of as kind of malicious, malicious spells, right? Spells.
Yes.
And I will say this, like the way I have figured out and what I have kind of picked up on from those who have taught me is we don't cast spells to control other people, right?
Yes.
And we don't cast spells on behalf of other people's journeys. Like, it's really important to me that's like you're casting the spell from your own longing and what you're willing to do and who you want to be, and in partnership with this large world, right? That you're like, I want to call this into being. But to me, that part of it always feels so important that I'm like, I'm not. And I can say it here that's like, there's a piece in here that I say, if anyone else is implicated in this spell, do you have their permission to cast it? And I think often about how the world would be so different if you had to have that permission of just like, oh, I want to cast a spell of, for instance, this abortion fight. I want to cast a spell of no abortions. And it's like, okay, well, that can't happen in your body. That can happen in my body. And so I don't give you permission to cast that spell because since it can't happen in your body, you don't know all the things that I know about this. And so it wouldn't make sense for you to be in charge of it, in the same way that I'm not going to cast a spell about anything that should happen with parts of the body that I don't have, right? Like, no. Could we all be safer if all testicles were removed? Maybe, but it's not up to me to cast that spell. And so I would never cast that spell, right? Because it would imply things beyond my comprehension. And I think in that way that I'm like, what do I know and what do I not know? What do I have permission to cast and what do I not? So this is why I'm like, I'm not going to give you love spell potions. I'm not going to give you a spell to change or manipulate anything. No. That's never it. No. And I think as we come out of collective manipulations,
bless you. You sneeze on the truth, as my grandmother would say.
Exactly. I'm just like, I know this is true now.
Yes.
But as we come out of these malicious spells that have been cast and we start to be in integrity with casting our own spells, yes, this piece feels so important. It's like we have to really be able to listen to each other and listen for consent. And the earth actually tells us all the time whether she consents or doesn't consent to things we're doing. So that's one of the things I'm hopeful that a lot of us get obsessed with is like, what are the spells that put us in right relationship with this earth and that have her consent to cast them? And how do we know? Like, oh, clear water, clear air, like she is at peace. The earthquakes calm some, like they're not man-made. Like there's a way that needs to be a spell we're all really focused on right now. So that's one of my prayers with this, with this work.
May it be so.
May it be so.
More consensual spells.
Consensual spells only. Thank you so much, Dori. This has been like a dream come true for me. I just think the world of you. And you're always in my mouth. I'm like literally always, like all day long, I'm going through my whole life, like Dori. Moving from one spell to another with you. So you're, all up in my work because of that. So I'm really grateful to get to do this with you.
Thank you. It is such a blessing. I mean, that's part of my prophetic work is to, make remedies that flow into the mouths of prophets and out into the world. So thank you for being a vessel for that and for inviting me into this sacred conversation. And your work is always in my heart and in my mouth.
Also, I love the phrase that Adrienne say, take responsibilities for being in community. I mean, I think it's that, let's take responsibility how we live in our community. Other thing that I want to comment here is about animism, that spiritual anarchism in some way, that Maree did a workshop, a really incredible workshop about that, and we soon wanted to share this with you guys. Now we have Time Bank. We have Time Bank last time, but this time we are more focused in the software, how it works, how it operates. Chris will be explained to us, will be like, she say that she's updated the new version of the software. And is that, let's try to understand how it looks like this software.
Right. So this workshop will focus on the practical aspects of Time Bank, how to create a time bank in one's own community and develop new economies that don't rely on money. I think Chris is already here. If you would like to start talking, or if we could spotlight.
I am here. So if you can hear me, which I hope you can.
Yes.
Good, because I'm here on my own in the house here. So praying that it all works.
Thank you again, Chris, for being here again. Like talk about time bank and hope new economy that no money. You can start. Thank you, Chris.
All right. So the first thing that first I would like to say thank you very much for inviting me again. I'm so happy to be here sharing time banking with you guys. It was very cool. It was very fun to share it last year. And this year, as Adrienne said, we're going to go into more detail about what it means to be doing time banking, what it looks like, the things you can do with time banking, the time banking software. So if you're inspired, which I hope you very much will be, to go forward and saying, we're going to create a time bank, you really get a good sense of what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? So that's the plan for today. And we'll hope and see how that goes. Okay. All right. So the first thing that I have to do is share screens with you. And this is my first hurdle. So I am going to go into share screens and people, I just hope this is going to go right. All right, here we go. So I believe that the screen that I go to is this one that has all the thing, and I need to share the sound and and I need to optimize for video clips. And now I go into share. Yay. And then I go into edit, I think. And I wanted to go, view, slideshow. Here we go. So here's the deal. Can you see it? Me. I am assuming that you can, and I am going to the, I'll tell you what, I'll exit the full. No, I'm just going to actually go back to that and assume that you can hear me. Because I think that Zoom cuts you out when you're in, you can't talk to anybody else but do the presentation. So here's the presentation, here's the agenda. I'm going to share with you one more time what time banking is. We're going to look at time banking software, and then we're going to show you the different ways through the software that exchanges make community. We're going to do a DC time bank. I'm actually going to show you how the software works, and then just have a kind of talk about the roles of the different leaders, and then very quickly the 5 core principles that time banks organize, and then close out. So the next slide that I'm going to is time banking is. And time banking is a complementary currency. It doesn't replace money. I mean, it can, people use it where they would otherwise use money. But as you know, we live in a money world. And so time banking sits in relationship to money. And there are sort of bridges between time banking, using time banking, and using regular money. And those bridges can be quite important to make sure that your time bank does well. So it's a medium of exchange where time is exchanged instead of money, and we call the units of the exchange time credits. There's no price. It's always an hour for an hour. That's what makes it a complementary currency rather than a replacement currency, because it actually does different things. It was founded in the 1980s by Edgar Kahn, who said, each hour is our precious slice of eternity. And if we exchange hour for hour, we are honoring the reality of that for every human being on this earth. So time banks and time banking are slightly different things. Time banking is the currency, and time banks are the places where it happens. So if you want to do a time banking, you have to create a time bank. And there are different kinds of time banks. There's time banks that are organized just for youth. YTB stands for Youth Time Bank. And those are actually spreading around the world. If you're interested in time banking just specifically for youth, you can do that. There are time banks that have been organized specifically around running youth courts. There are time banks that are very particularly for building community. And there are time banks for helping people, for instance, get out of hospital, remain at home. So time banks have different missions and visions and different kinds of exchanges. And again, they're not a complete alternative to money. They fill in where money doesn't work. They fill in beautifully to allow for things to happen that money does not allow to happen. So we are now going to watch a time bank coordinator, Catalina, who was with the St. Pete Time Bank, and then she was a coordinator, time bank coordinator with the St. Pete Time Bank, and then she moved to Hawaii. And when she moved to Hawaii, she sent us a little video about time banking. So we are going to go and see about her doing time banking. So we're going to go and see that video now, I hope. So this is where we go now. All right, so I'm going to start this and then go to full.
But I am the executive director of a nonprofit called Everyday Hero Project, and we support residents and their dreams to make the world better, because it shouldn't be that hard. So we help to provide fiscal sponsorship and office space and all the things that made it hard for me when I was trying to make a difference. And that's why time banking has been so significant in everything that we've been doing. So you can go ahead and share your screen. Thank you, Abby.
Okay.
So I actually created this slideshow because of the Kokua Exchange launch here in East Hawaii. And we inserted this into the presentation so we could help people understand how this narrative goes from somebody who has no idea what time banking is to somebody who is doing what I'm doing today. So in 2015, actually, I was in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I happened to meet an amazing woman at a booth. Her name was BJ, and she was talking about the Tampa Time Bank. And I just stood in front of her. I had been on tour for years and have been trying to really help people understand what time and currency is all about. And I just sat there with tears streaming down my eyes when I was listening to what she was talking about. And I attended a potluck with Kaimana, actually. She was in a stroller about the Tampa Time Bank that was in downtown St. Petersburg. But it was kind of far over the bridge. And so it didn't really come into my life until the next slide. When BJ approached me the year afterwards and said, hey, would Everyday Hero Project be interested in fiscally sponsoring the St. Pete Time Bank? And I said, absolutely, I totally want to do this. I'm just stuck on the side of the bridge because I have a baby. So we did. And over the years, to the next slide, now this number is much larger now. In just 5 short years, 30,000 hours have been exchanged. And so when I try to explain to people, what does this number mean to you? I don't unless it's explained with interactions and pictures. So go to the next slide. So it didn't actually my head took a long time to wrap around it. So even though I helped BJ in 2016, I really didn't start using it until 2017 when BJ was like, Catalina, you do so much for the community. This is what time banking is for. What in your life do you need help with? And it's laundry, right? I have so many things going on, the whole folding laundry. So this is actually a screenshot. And this was a significant time in my life because after this moment, it was not that often that I had to fold my own laundry. People would come over to my house. I would prepare them tea and stuff. And then they would fold my laundry while they watched movies and hung out. And that's BJ there. So, these mundane chores have really, I've seen how they can become community builders through the time bank. And this is a shot of people. I was 8 months pregnant and moved into a house, and these wonderful ladies showed up and helped organize and helped us, because I felt like I was like bending down, and they're like, "What are you doing? We're gonna come over." It's like, I feel like I'm gonna give birth after all the organizing I did yesterday. And then to the next. And actually, my second chance at love with my new husband and my baby, we're actually a time bank family, a time bank love story, because I put a call out for I wanted to switch my room and have like the room I always dreamed about, which was, you know, the small room with the whole thing was a bed and like really cool decorated. So I put a call out, can people help me with figuring out how to do this project? And so people in the time bank went and picked up paint for me. And then my husband now, he answered the call, the request for help painting. And over a period of 3 days, my husband and I fell in love. So it's a time bank love story. And then I will never forget, because we had a whirlwind ceremony about 8 months later, because, you know, we were crazy enough to say, let's do a sunrise ceremony. It will be awesome. And that's awesome in theory until you're about to leave for your wedding and you look at your house and know you're coming back from the honeymoon and it's just wrecked because the wedding party has been there. There's like stuff everywhere. And our time bank angel, Joey Untsmore, she came in and she cleaned our whole place after. And when we got back, not only was it clean, but she left us a cute little non-alcoholic present there so we could celebrate, since we were pregnant with the baby. And then on the next slide. And then I will never forget. Now, Sandy Bigler took this and kept going with this. And I thought it was amazing because one of my friends in the time bank, Jen, she knew that I was going to have my third C-section. I was also getting surgery for like getting everything closed up because I'm like not having any more babies. And she put out this request for a meal trade. And for 3 weeks straight, where I could barely move and my stomach hurt so badly, lunch and dinner were prepared for my whole family of 5. And that was so significant for us. So significant that when my best friend in St. Pete and from over here, she recently had a baby, I put a call out and said, hey, can we do a meal train for Taylor? And Sandy picked up the call and she created the meal train so we could like keep that going. And that made such a big difference. And then, of course, you know, there's the little baby that came out of the time bank love. And we got some childcare while we were doing things around the house to help with her. So the baby carriage. Baby Zen. Okay, next slide. And so this just showed, this was like 1 week, and we were just trying to show people an example of how the volunteers that came and helped us through the time bank affected the nonprofit. This is just Thursdays, there was a cleanup in St. Pete. Friday, we had a joint event with Greenpeace USA, and there was time bank volunteers at that, time bank volunteers giving education at the camping trip afterwards. There's BJ leading an activation, and then we had to pick up the Pete cleanup. So over that period of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4 days, there was probably something like 150 hours exchanged just in 4 days. And then I like to let everyone know how significant it was. Go ahead to the next slide. For us and for our business to help everybody. So through the time bank, we were, and all of our networks, our social networking, which Abby was talking about, you know, these coalition teams of organizations and individuals that have assets and may not be aligned in their missions all the time, but an event happens and then boom, we're all on the same page. So 400,000 pounds of supplies delivered across the United States. We hosted 3 activation retreats, and we did hurricane relief all over the southeastern United States. And this was all, a lot of this was like time bank supplies that had been collected. And then of course, on the next page, we had a complete makeover with our graphic design. So that changed with our website and the logo. And so that really affected how people understand Everyday Hero Project. If you look at the logo on the left, you're like, okay, people that love the earth. Yes. And I can get it from the from the banner what they're trying to do. But when you look on the right side, you can see the intergenerational component is like, oh, and then you see that the light bulbs that are activating everyone, they're in different places of our body, just kind of like how we are with our different talents and our different things that we have to offer. And next page. And so we finally did it. We ended up moving to East Hawaii, and it was like a surprise. The timing really helped us out there too. We ended up move, and then the timing people helped us pack all of our stuff, clean up our house, and like we had just had the baby, so it was like, wow, you guys, thank you so much. So we came out here, and this room that I'm in right now, this was a storage room for 30 years that my landlord had. And it was the time bank guys. 3 guys came in here. They each put in 5 time bank hours and turned out the whole office. They helped him unload all the stuff, blow this place out, unroll the carpet, place all the furniture. And so it was really beautiful. It was unexpected that I was actually going to be doing time banking here. So I was just sharing with them that I was a little bit sad that I wasn't sure if time banking was going to be part of my life here. And what happened is the Kokua Exchange was already an existing time bank here in Hawaii, but they actually reached out. I think they reached out to you guys, right? Like to pair them up with somebody. So they got paired up with BJ to help get some time bank mentorship. And BJ said, are you kidding me? Catalina just moved there like a couple months ago. So we got together and now it is exploding. So in May of this year, Kokua Exchange had 21 recorded hours on the books, and we are now somewhere over 800. So we just really, truly try to help people understand what it is and really embody what time banking is. It's a more rural place. So we recently held, we got a grant from AARP, and AARP was giving grants for me to do activations for all of the islands. And so luckily, we ended up with somebody that said, hey, I would like to do a time bank activation on Lanai. Can we do a virtual one? And actually nobody ended up coming. And I said, great, we can use the time to talk to each other, what we can do for you. And she said, the problem is that like people just need to see it. People on Lanai don't want to join a Zoom call. So I just happened to be going to Maui next week. She just happened to tell me that there's a ferry that goes from Maui to Lanai. So we are actually going to Maui next week. We're going to do a cleanup event on both sides of the islands. And so we're going to be calling it the Ferry Merry Cleanup. I love that so. I think it's so funny. And we're going to do a time bank blitz on Lanai. So we're going to do 4 events in 7 hours and kind of launch that whole thing over there and try to trailblaze inter-island exchange, because I'm so excited for each and every one of you to come here to Hawaii and start doing some exchanges and checking out what we got here. So thank you. That's it.
Oh my, Catalina, do you have a twin that might want to come to Kent?
Well, I would just like to eventually like hop on the BJ train and be traveling and see all of you guys, because the latest and last piece of news that I will give you, which is very exciting news, is that one of the major leaders who is creating the United Indigenous Nations, whom I've been working with since 2009, he has like 38,000 groups globally with all the different nations. He used to be an intertribal judge of the North American continent. He reached out and said, can you help us launch a time bank?
Oh my gosh.
I'll be calling you guys about that, because we're going to go on a First Nations tour and launch 38,000 community time banks under the United Indigenous Nations.
Oh, I have so many goosebumps, and I'd love to, Chris, if you and Edgar could unmute, I'd love to hear your thoughts from here.
Well, that's such a dream come true, that we could help empower the tribes and help empower those indigenous networks of governance that are different from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but that represent people coming together and drawing upon their own cultural traditions, and not only drawing upon them, but passing them on to their.
Okay, I hope you can still hear me. I'm stepping in again, and now I'm actually going to do, the next thing that I want to do with you is to go to the, gosh, I need to move this. I want to go to the Kokua Time Bank, which is on, here is the Time Bank software that they use. This is called Community Weaver, and I should just say this has been in use for many years now, and we're actually bringing out a new version at the end of the year. But I thought that I could show you how this software works and also give you a sense of the kinds of exchanges that are going on. So you heard Catalina say that they had exchanged 800 hours when she did the call with us. Now they're up to 1,962.5 hours of exchanges. And how you do it is this says you can browse services. When people join the Time Bank, they list the things that they would like to offer just generally to others. I can give people rides. I can cook great food. I can pet sit. I can do accounting, all the things that you think you could offer, that you'd be willing to offer to other people for time and not money. And then there are specific offers. Let me see if I can click on the Time Bank's talents. These are all the different categories. So I'm going to go to cleanups and let's see if we can see anything. So there's 38 members. We cannot see those members because we are not members of this Time Bank. We just know that 38 members are offering to do cleanup. And if we need cleanup, there's a whole of people that will do cleanup for us if that's what we need. So I will go back. So as well, there are, let's go to here, there are offers by category. So same categories, but very specific offers. So this is, there's 2 classes being offered, there's music being offered, other things being offered. You can see there's way fewer offers than there are just general putting it out there. I'm willing to help with this, I'm willing to help with that. So that when you're looking for help, you can just go to the, what we call the Time Bankers Talents and find that help. And then there are requests by category. Oh, look, there's just one request going on. And the reason why this might look a bit strange is that in actual fact, what you're doing is creating a very live network, and the sort of center of that live network here is the Time Bank, is the Time Bankers Talents. So I'm going to go back to the home page, and I'm just going to talk about what have been recent offers and recent requests. And you can see that the offers are very kind of unique individual offers. They're not generic. Make a copper wand, a gemstone necklace, language skills, artistic or creative expression, facilitating inner contentment. So they're people offering something that's a passion of theirs. And requests are more general in general. Computer assistance, remote beach cleanup, that's a group project. Quad repair, that's another group project. Weed racking, that's probably another group project, as is delivering meals to our community. So the requests, as you can see in this Time Bank, are mostly group community projects. And the offers are individual members saying, hey, I can also offer this very unique thing. So that's just to give you one Time Bank. Now I want to take you to another where you will see that the members, the Time Bankers set their software up a little differently. So each Time Bank can have some control over the colors and what they put on the homepage and what they allow the public to see. And so this one is the West Seattle Time Bank. And in this one, they have no events scheduled, but that actually was just in that moment, because here they have a Time Bank gathering in person for Tuesday, September the 13th, coming up very, very shortly at Puget Ridge Edible Park. Yay. And here are some of the things on their news. They noting the passing of Ed and died earlier this year. They're welcoming a new board person. There's art classes for all on Zoom, which are free, or maybe done for time credits, I'm not sure. And they're launching a new buddy program, which is that when somebody joins, another time bank member who's used to doing time banking guides that new member into the process of doing time banking. Because I can tell you, when you're used to using money and you think that time banking will work like money, it really doesn't. It feels different. It's sort of different, and you have to get familiar with it. So this is a way to get people familiar with it. And of course, they're having their gathering at the time bank. So that's their news. Let's have a look and see if we can see what they're offering and requesting. So let's go down here. Let's see if it's easy to see. This is an older time bank, has done 18,570 hours. And here are the things. There's a whole group of people went plum picking. So different members went and earned time credits for plum picking, 2 hours each. That was a community event. And here's some offers. A volunteer at the New Start Community Garden. Let me design a PowerPoint for you. I can lead yoga, gentle yoga classes. Oh, this is a good. So time banking can share goods as well. And each time bank has different rules for how many time credits get shared. It may be, there was one time bank, for instance, ran a thrift store, and everything in that thrift store was one time bank, plus one time credit, plus whatever time it took to move it. So like a dishwasher is heavy. So if it took 3 people to get it to somebody's home and install it, and they took an hour each, that would be 3 time credits for that, but just 1 time credit for the dishwasher. And another time bank had a little time bank store where you went along and you just donated as many time bank credits as you would like to the time bank, because it was owned by the time bank. And members would say, hey, I love that hat. I'll pay 2 time credits for that hat. And they're donated to the time bank store. Or they could offer money and say, no, I'm going to actually give money, because every time bank also needs money. It takes money to run and host time, websites, and it takes some money to actually run a time bank. So time banking is not a bubble all by itself. It lives in coexistence with the money economy, and the nature of the bridges and the connections that are made with the money economy are very, very much a part of how you set up and organize a time bank. So, for instance, we have, and I just met with a time bank founder who has founded a time bank in Cameroon in Africa. And she lives here. She's a nurse. Her name is Elise. I hope she's watching. She said she would be watching today. Elise is a nurse who learned about time banking when Edgar was in the hospital. And she was so excited. She said, hey, we could do this at Cameroon. So she's setting up a time bank in Cameroon, and she's collecting all kinds of goods to send to Cameroon to act as resources and rewards for the time bank over there. But it's taking much longer to organize that than she thought, and she's got a bit stuck. So we said, how can we make things continue to grow in your time bank, even though we can't get all these goods over there? So what we agreed was that for a $100 donation, which we got the donation of $100, we could send that money over to the time bank, and the time bank could contract with 2 people who've been very active with the time bank, who have their own businesses, One of them makes soap and disinfectants and sells them. And the other makes dried fish, which is very, very important source of protein. And I should just say that in Cameroon, $100 is easily a month's income for somebody. The money over there counts for a lot more. So she is setting up an agreement with these two businesses that they will make available soap, disinfectant, and dried fish. And the time bank will work out how much soap can you get for 1 credit and how much dried fish can you get for 1 credit. And people will buy these very, very crucial life-supporting items by working in the time bank and doing things in the time bank like the community garden, which is huge. They've actually creating a community farm, and they're going to be learning how to raise special chickens that are resistant to disease. They're doing all kinds of things in the community and helping out in the community. They will then be able to buy soap, disinfectant, and dried fish. And this is just the beginning. There's going to be a lot more. So you see how these bridges happen between the time bank, all the stuff that happens in the time bank, and then the things that are happening in the larger economy, and how we can make these connections between the two. So what else did I am going to keep going. So what I am now going to do is talk about, show you actually the DC time bank. Here we are, I'm going to the DC time bank. Now the DC time bank has its own colors again, its own, set up its homepage, here we are. And it makes fewer things available to the public. You can see, you can't see so very much. But I happen to be a coordinator for the DC time bank. So I'm going to click on where I'm already logged in. And you can see, wow, there is so much more. This is all going on behind the scenes for the members. The members get to see all of this. And we can actually, as the coordinators, we can determine what the members do and don't see. So we have a control panel and we decide what colors will be, what will go up. And I'm going to just very, very quickly show you the gifts and receives and the offers and requests in this time bank. So here we go. So again, we have record and exchange, post and offer, post a request, time bankers talents. So let's just look at the time bankers talents. So there you see, there's a whole bunch of people offering to do all kinds of different things. And I won't click on them because if I click on what will happen is everybody's details will come up and there are privacy issues. But if I clicked up on one of these, what you would see is a whole list of members with their contact information, and you'd be able to reach out to them and say, hey, and it would say what kind of classes they're doing. And I would say, oh gosh, you know, I really want to do this, that, or the other, and contact that person. I am going to, in a moment, show you my profile, but let me just go quick more through the offers and requests and the site a bit more. So these are the members, and I won't show you the members again because of privacy, but there's a whole long list of members and their contact information. So I'll just show you my profile so you can see mine and what comes in my profile. So here we are, not a very clear picture, but there we are. And there's a whole bunch of information about me, how I connect to the community, who I'm a guardian angel for, my recent offers, what has recently expired, and my recent requests, certain things that I would like to do on this. Who can see my profile page, you can see my picture, and I've said members, but you can reset these things. There are, what else do I want to show you on my, These are recent exchanges that I've done. So then the next thing I'm going to show you is my, so this is like a statement. Nope, that's my current services, I'm sorry. My exchanges, it's like the statement. And come on, it's supposed to go there. Here you are, it shows that I've done 157 hours of exchange, I've earned 80, and I've spent 77. So here is the list of all the things that I've done over time. And I can go back and look at that at any time. And as Edgar would say, again, another link to the mainstream economy. If you have somebody who hasn't been able to get a job for a long time, but they've done a lot of time banking stuff, they can print this out and say, these are all the things I've done. This is evidence of what I've been doing in the community. So what else? Oh, so one thing else I want to say is that one of the things that happens with time banking is as you get to know other members, it's very tempting not to actually put the hours in. So for instance, I had a time bank member, a DC time bank member come over yesterday and spend 3 hours with me getting my Wi-Fi working because it wasn't working. And so he came over and we worked on it together and he got it working again. I haven't put that time in yet. And I know that Arnold would say to me, don't bother, Chris, don't worry, you don't need to put the time in. You know, we're friends. We've become friends through the time bank. And I would just do this for you anyway. And time banks have to keep reminding their members, no, please don't do that. Show the hours, show the hours. Because what actually shows on the hours is usually just a fraction of all the exchanges that end up being made through the time bank. I'm just going to show you one quick more thing about, this is the software. So this is where I, the coordinator, go and sort of control what's happening. So this is the dashboard. This tells me all the information about things that are going on, how many members, how many hours, how many exchanges. It also, that's just a quick view of everything going on. Then I can manage members, I can set up pages, I can send out news and alerts, I can create events. I can send out broadcast emails, which go out instantly to all the members. I can configure I can configure how the page looks and configure emails that go out to people. When somebody joins, for instance, it automatically triggers an email that says, hello, thank you for signing up and please do these things. So these are all the controls. One more thing, and then I'll get out of this. I will go here to my profile. And you can see there's a whole bunch of things up here. These members don't get to see these. I do because I'm the coordinator. And I can convert a member to an organization. Members do get to see their profile status. So I'm going to show you my profile status, which I think right now is a bit incomplete. So here we go. I signed up. I verified my email address. I agreed to the terms of the service. I completed my profile. Oh, I'm all complete. I posted a picture. I wrote about me, put in my address, my neighborhood, and at least one phone number. Now, different time banks can actually request, say they want different things in the profile. This is what we, the DC time bank, agreed would be right for our time bank. So I think, let's see, is there anything else I want to show you? I go back to the homepage. Just this read more tells you more about, it just gives you a bit more detail. You can see here, this is the history of it, all the things that we've done over time. So go back to the DC Time Bank homepage. And if there's anything else that I would like to show you, I think this is good for now. I think I've given you a sort of pretty good idea. Let's just see if there's anything in the news here. Oh, because I'm in coordinator mode, it shows the different newsletters that we have put out there, the different news items that we've put out there. That's all that does. Okay, that is going to be enough of the looking at the software. So I am now going to move on. I am going to stop screen sharing. So how do I do that? Stop share. Okay. All righty. Stop share and go to me. Hey. I hope that you are now seeing me. Okay, so what I need to talk with you about right now is leadership roles. Oh, I'm going back a bit. So why do people do time banking? There's really a lot of reasons why people do time banking, and that's why time banks vary so much. So people do time banking to save money, to get access to things that they couldn't access with the money they do have. They just still can't get into certain things. They don't have enough money, or there's just the money doesn't sort of give you entree to certain things. To connect more with your community, to help people, help others, to help people yourself, to explore new kinds of activities, to respond to specific needs in the community, and just have fun. All reasons why people do time banking. And that's why we have many different kinds of time bank. Most are really for building community. But like I said at the beginning, there's youth court time banks. Cross-age peer tutoring was a brilliant time bank in Chicago for many years. Sadly got defunded. They used to tutor kids. It was fifth graders tutoring second graders and third graders. And they would earn 50 time credits for doing that for a whole year. And then they got a recycled computer. It was a beautiful, beautiful program. Thousands of kids did that. The community exchange is when people were coming out of hospital. Very often, after a major time in hospital, they can't stay out very well. Something happens and boom, they're back in the hospital. But if you have a time bank providing support, they're much, much more likely to stay out of the time bank and then out of the hospital. And then when they're better, as members, they pay back, they pay it forward. So let me talk about the leadership roles in a time bank, because the leadership roles, there's 3 areas of leadership, and a time bank cannot run if it doesn't have leadership. There's real, just like in the money economy, we have banks, we have institutions, we make things happen. It's not just from, somehow somebody talking about the last thing, somebody waves a wand and makes a spell and says, let there be money. No, there's a lot of social organization about creating money and distributing it and storing it. And it's the same with time credits. You have a time bank manages, sets up a situation where flows of this currency happen. So here are the 3 main areas of leadership in a time bank. And I'm sorry that you're not actually seeing the PowerPoint, you're just seeing me right now, but there is I wonder if I can share screen again and actually lead us into the PowerPoint. I am just going to talk, you're just going to hear me. So one area of leadership, and I'm putting this one first because you can't even start a time bank until you've really got this sort of worked out, and that's governance. You need to decide what kind of time bank will we be? Who will we be open to? What's our real mission? Do we want to help a small community get a stronger sense of itself? Do we want to build trust in that community? Or do we want to do something more specific, like be a time bank that's totally organized around cleaning up a river, for instance? You could do that. You can have all different kinds of time banks. And so the people who come together and found the time bank have to be really clear on what is the mission and what is the vision? What do we want to actually accomplish together? And what are our goals, and what are our policies? Who will we, what are the criteria for having people be members? Do they have to agree, I will do one time credit a month? And if I don't, then my membership will be deactivated. So there are policies to make. You will have to find some funding. It's not much, but again, I talked about these bridges to the economy. Like Elise in Cameroon, they can't do it with no money whatsoever. They need money as well as time. And that's just sort of the reality of the world. And there needs to be different kinds of resources. So who and where will the support come from? That has to be decided. So that decision-making and policies, and what are the rules by which our time bank will exist and live, the founders have to sort those things out. And they may not sort them out really kind of set in stone, but they have to start that journey going first. So that's why I put governance as the first thing. The second huge area is membership. So people join a time bank just like they join a co-op or join any number of sort of community organizations. People join a time bank, and some people, some leaders in the time bank have to do outreach. They have to do orientations to let people know this is how this time bank works. This is how you exchange time. This is how you use the software. These are people that are doing this kind of exchange. Welcome. So basically what they have to do is welcome and connect new members. They have to give them an orientation. And then you saw how in the Seattle one, they've got a buddy system. You have to do a bit of hand-holding for new members, because actually it sounds so easy. It sounds like, oh, just exchange credits like we do money. Not so much. For instance, I went and painted somebody's bathroom for them. It was 5 hours of work. It's a lot of work. It looked beautiful, actually, when it was done. And I got my 5 time credits. Now, if I were a painter, maybe I could have got like $200, but I got 5 time credits. This is a different kind of set of value propositions here, and be very comfortable with that and say, that's okay. I don't know what my 5 time credits will get me. Whereas if I had $200, I could be pretty clear, $200 I could get, But time, it's much more variable. So it's a different dynamic. So the membership team also has to do a newsletter if you choose to do a newsletter, or post alerts, or connect if there's an emergency, connect to the members, or perhaps host a Facebook page. So there's all kinds of things related to the membership which you need leadership for. So time banks need a fair bit of leadership. And the more that you can encourage each member to play, it might be a tiny leadership role, but every member does something to support the time bank, as well as doing exchanges either for themselves or for groups or for organizations in the community. They also support the time bank. So lastly, the exchanges, the actual exchanges, helping to make those happen. Coordinators are there sort of on hand. People can make their exchanges through the software or by themselves, no problem. But sometimes people are nervous about making exchanges. You're trying to build trust in the community. And the coordinators stand as the kind of backbone of the time bank, making sure that everything happens in a trustworthy way, in accord with the 5 core principles. And that's where I'm now going to lead you, which is time banking is organized. We just found really, this was by experience, that if there are 5 core principles applied, the time banks are healthier, stronger, more vibrant, do more things. And the one is everybody has something to offer. The second is reciprocity, that giving and receiving stand on a level playing field. You give, you receive, both are equal, both are valued, both help to build trust in the community. The third is that the work, redefining work, because money doesn't recognize, honor, or reward an awful lot of that's very, very important in our societies. And time banking, like a little vacuum cleaner, they find those things and they say, hey, that counts, that matters, that helps our community, that helps those families, that this, and this helps. So sometimes that's thought of as volunteering. Time banks often actually do time credits for people who are doing work that's very similar to volunteering. But the earning and spending time credits honors, recognizes that work and rewards that work. The next one, so we've got assets, reciprocity, work redefined. The fourth is community and networks. And basically it's saying our communities and our networks make us stronger together, and the more diverse, the more generous and open they are, the stronger we are. So we aim to have diverse communities, diverse networks where people bring their different strengths, their different resources, and we mix it up and we get stronger in that way. And the very last core value, I'm looking at the time here, the very last core value is respect. And it's almost like it's the foundation. When Edgar first wrote out the four values, he did four. And then we recognized actually they all rest on something, on a foundation. And that foundation is respect, mutual respect, understanding that we lead into the world and into relationships with others on the basis of respect. And sometimes that can lead to difficult conversations. Sometimes, so to share with you, a staff person who's also a member of the time bank at a homeless shelter in London. And they had a rule: you could not come into that homeless shelter if you had been drinking. And a member wanted to come in, and he was a time bank member, and he said, well, you know, I'm here, I'm a time bank member, I want to do stuff. And the staff person was sharing with me how he faced this kind of challenge. What am I going to do? And he said, I had to say, with respect, our time bank and this shelter has a rule that you must honor, and I cannot let you in, you've been drinking. But it was done in a way that honored the sense of who that other person was and his responsibility in life. So those are the core values. I think it's time for me to wrap up at this point in time.
Hey, Chris, we still have 15 minutes. Now you want to open for discussion?
Great. I'm open to any questions.
Okay, I comment. I think one important point here is how we change our logic. That there's no more money, but it's mutual aid, and solidarity instead of competition. I mean, that for me is a kind of end of capitalism, because the capitalism is exactly we're ruining the world right now. Now, let's be clear here. You brought many interesting parts, and we also we'd like to open to discussion now. Okay, and our collective have one question for you right now, and we want to start.
Which is, so how can we know that there's many examples of time banks and of mutual aid organizations happening independently from capitalism, not parallel to capitalism, so not relying on any money. And we're wondering if there's any experiences that you could share with us in which time banks have been organized without any structure related to money, in inclusive settings, and to the public as well, that's accessing this on YouTube. If they would like to join the Zoom, which is available, you can see the meeting ID on the live stream. If they would like to come and comment as well, that would be very appreciated.
So you can hear me okay. I'm getting an echo, I'm not sure why, but this is how I want to answer this. Every time bank is formed in community by community. And the time credits are the time credits. You're exchanging hours and you're setting up the structure that I described. You're setting up, this is how we're going to use software. You can get free software if you want it. There is free time banking software. There's also time banking software that costs money. And there are these roles that need to be played. There needs to be leadership. There needs to be coming together. There needs to be gatherings where people share food and all of that sort of stuff. And every time bank has the resources it has. And so if they have very little money, they only have the resources that they can, or no money, they have the resources that they have in their community that they can activate. What you are doing with the time bank is you are activating resources. You are doing it on a different basis. You are creating value chains on a different basis than money. But in a way, on the invisible economy, what we call the core economy of home, family, neighborhood, and community. If that didn't exist, capitalism couldn't work. Capitalism takes for granted a huge amount of effort and work in society. Any sort of formal economy does. And what we're saying is, well, the vice versa is true. The home, family, neighborhood, and community, the things that you do together, they actually relate to the formal economy. Are there places where there is no formal economy? Sure there are. You know, indigenous peoples, they live almost entirely in what we would call the core economy of sharing, growing things together. But even here, you know, you have people with different levels of resource, even in tribal communities. It's not like it's totally the same for everybody. So what I would answer you is, in a way, that's a question that steps outside of our current reality. Our current reality is there are mainstream economies, and everything we do will relate to those mainstream economies.
Thanks. Another question we had was, does the fact that, or having communities, so Time Bank is about mobilizing the resources that communities already have. If those communities rely on money, is it possible that the fact that these communities are relying on money to create a new support network is actually exclusive and excludes certain people that may need the help that Time Bank offers, that may not be able to contribute as much time credit as they actually need to have a somewhat decent life? Is that a possible thing?
So what you have said to me is that time banks rely on money. That is a kind of all or nothing statement. In fact, it's a big continuum. Sometimes banks are able to work with a very little bit of money, and sometimes banks in a sort of, somebody starts up a time bank in a well-off community with a lot of they have excess resources, and some of those are money, and they put money into the time bank. Great. So it varies very much. And as well, you have other sources. So what you're looking at again, I went off track from what you're looking at again is you're assessing and analyzing, and this is where leadership is called for. You're saying, we want to make these things happen. What kinds of resources will make these things happen? Is it wisdom? Is it knowledge? Is it hard labor? Is it connections? What are the resources that we need to do to make these things happen? And then how will we get those? And in the mix is exchanging time for time. And that's why I showed you Catalina and her experience with the time bank, because you got to see the many different ways in which she was living in the mainstream economy, but she didn't have a lot of money, and she used her own great ability to connect with people to get all kinds of things happening that she couldn't otherwise have done. So to answer your question, resource-rich communities, in a way, they could make time banking happen more easily, except they don't have much reason to. You know, they've got money, just use money. the reasons why you use time banking, I shared with you the many reasons why you use time banking. One of them, I'm getting a little bit lost on myself. I think I'll just go back to the beginning of this answer, which is to say it varies. It varies. It varies on the spirit of the people involved in the time bank. It varies on the quality of the leadership. It varies on what's available to them organically, and on and on and on. Each time bank is unique.
Great. Chris, I'd like to pass a question for Jim Fleming. He has a really interesting question. Can you please, Jim?
Let's see. I'm unmuted now, I guess.
Yes.
There's a long tradition of labor hours. The very prominent 19th century established a series of labor notes. He was a much overlooked philosopher who established a commune out on Long Island called Modern Times. Many people think of him as the first American anarchist. There's also a tradition more recently of local community currencies, alternative currencies, like Ithaca dollars in Ithaca, New York is one of these. These seem to have a pretty fundamental relation to the project that you're engaged in. How many time banks are there and where are they?
So thank you for sharing that information. Yes, indeed, time banking is not new. The modern version of it is what the modern version is. But in Britain too, there was a currency that was based on hours, started by, I think it was, having a moment where I can't remember his name. But
Robert Owen.
Robert Owen. Thank you. Yes. So so yes, just to honor all of those earlier uses of time as a currency. And also, I want to just quickly as well speak to Ithaca hours and other complementary currencies, local currencies. Unlike time banking is an hour for an hour. And as Edgar wrote in his book, No More Throwaway People, when you change the nature of the exchange, you change the kind of dynamics of the exchanges that happen. So Ithaca hours is wonderful, but it's not, it has price. You can pay more for this and less for that, but time banking is dedicated to the notion that we are equal. It is an hour for an hour. So I get an hour for dog sitting, pet sitting. I get an hour for doing what my friend did for me, which is come and fix my Wi-Fi, where he could have charged a lot of money for doing that. So it's equal. That is one difference. And around the world. So time banking is now, we've lost track, honestly, of the number of countries. We know it's at least 35 countries. It's thriving across South America. It's taking up in Africa. We know of 5 countries in Africa where there's now time banking. It's spread across Europe. It's very dynamic in Great Britain. It's supported by the government in Wales. It's everywhere. Time banking, yay, is everywhere. And how many people are doing it? We long ago lost track of that, but we reckon it's, in terms of the world economy, it's a tiny blip, hundreds of thousands, maybe tiny blip. I mean, you could go into a city and it would be one multi-block, but in terms of the principle, the spirit, the things that are happening, it's being transformative. China now has 300 time banks associated with Chinese universities. So we've been told. We haven't been over there. Chinese professor called us and said, do you know we have 300 time banks? Wow, we did not know. So that is how it's happening.
Great, thank you so much. We're glad to have been able to participate in this discussion. Yeah, thanks for coming. The next speaker will be Tongo Eisen Martin, who is a poet from San Francisco. He was with us also last year, and we're really excited to have him again. So we'll just wait for him to
Also,
come.
we have now a video, no? And,
and then we'll follow up with some videos and some
and a video that we just shot in São Paulo, Brazil, no? We together with Sônia Guajajara and indigenous in Brazil.
And and then the Zoom is open for people to come if they would like. If you're on YouTube, you can find the meeting ID on the banner below, and you can also go to our website and head over to either the main page and access the link directly there, or to the individual pages of each workshop.
And thank you so much, Catalina and Chris, for this amazing workshop. No, I think this is just the beginning, no, and we're here to continue thinking about these new possibilities of economy and, and equality and elimination of classes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Por que interrompeu o vídeo?
Hello. Thanks for coming again. We're really glad to have you. Tonga Mattern is a poet from San Francisco who was with us last year. Impressed us a lot with everything, and we loved, and everybody in the book fair had amazing things to say about Tonga Martin. So we're really, really grateful that you can make it here today again with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Happy to see you again. Yeah, I'm so happy. Thank you. Whip a high.
They will slide the wallpaper right into your cereal bowl. Flesh market, both sides of the levee, change of plans, both sides of the nonviolence, on no earth, just an earth character. I'm a beggar, and all of this day is too easy. I want to see all the phases of a wall, every age it goes through, its humanity, its environmental racism. We call this the ordeal blues. Now crawl to the piano seat and make a blanket for yourself. Paint scenes of a child dancing up to a court appearance and leaving an adult, but not for home. Atlantic Ocean charts mixed in with the parole papers. Mainstream funding, the ruling class is only pacifism. Ruling class printing judges. Fiat kangaroos making judges hand over fist. Rapture cop packs and opposition whites all above a thorny stem. Cast plans picked out like vans for the murder show. Anglo saints addicting you to a power structure. You want me to raise a little slave, don't you? Bash his little brain in and send him to your civil rights. No pain, just a white pain. Delicate bullets in a box next to a stack of monolith scriptures make these bullets look relevant, don't they? I remember you. Everywhere you lay your hat is the capital of the South, the posture you introduce to that fence to fence, you introduce to political theory. If you shred my dream, son, I will tack you to gun smoke. The suburbs are finally offended. This will be a meditation too. Capitalists eat until the world is blurry to them. These streets are made of saliva. Some people made of saliva too. They usually have on uniforms. While a crazy man spins round and round trying to make a record out of this mass production jungle, maybe I'll join him. Count cash and cry. These streets are made of saliva, and white sheets are worn by a building in which kids are supposed to learn how to read well. White sheets on the highway too. Another mayor needs their head on the pike. One down is just one down. But if you tell all this to the masses, your teacher will pipeline you. They told me I was jewelry. They told me this is jungle. Well, maybe not jungle, more like 50 machine guns planted in the ground. It's raining faces again in California. What does it say about heaven? What does it say about the people you killed? Waiting lines got so exhausted, the million minds dropped all these faces at once. If the fascists can read the lips of a giant talking in his sleep, we might as well make our demands in prison letters. Today was born the most important trigger finger in the world. Today, I begun counting down the pages between now and a pile of books by a tunnel. Chicago is going to walk out of Chicago one day. Babies that drag street signs like old toys. Today, the most important letter left prison. Babies will laugh at flags like faces that have disappeared. Maybe I'll join them, but for now, these streets have made us alive. We raise half full glasses to the basements that meant nothing, and the working poor who live there. We get shot. We get white sheets on California, where the kitchen table like to talk as much as the walls and romance on the porch consists of hard residing. I mean, in this picture, characters talk spit and know that they're hard to kill. Knows this. The porch is almost convinced that one down is just one down. This town is coming to town. The circus watching itself, half distracted, half suicidal. Thrilled children dressed as cops, thrilled children preaching and policing and intaking and hiring and snatching your money. This town's coming to town with tough trademarks to follow. Today, I watch capitalism walk on water and people play dead so that they could be part of a miracle. You know, I had this dream playing it dead in the middle of a weekday that I was laid up in the hospital. And people kept coming into my room by the dozens. And each dozen had special handshakes for each other and occasionally current dance moves. And they would kick my hospital bed from time to time to let me know that they'd be dancing from this room on out to my grave. Strange cha-chas and soft shoe shuffles, disco spins, like they were dancing for a white sundial, marking numbness in their feet, drum race ride. And I was ready to die because, you know, ask a musician in the tombs after court, it's the surroundings that is the uniform, but I just couldn't bring myself to visualize against God. I mean, one of them stood over me like a conductor, waving their arms over my body, directing my heart to beat fainter and fainter, directing the tubes to turn the fluids back, and I faded from consciousness with thud after thud on the legs of my bed as they danced wilder and wilder. Well, wild but meek, or artificially meek, like an artificial pastor told them to be. I was to be some kind of projection or character to be laid at their feet, that you the only one participating in the revolution today. They mocked, and I was ready to go because, you know, there are plenty of pianos that could use a new song, and I'm thinking we're going to be in the revolution for as long as it takes, so you can punch me out, born with one foot in the lime pit anyway. But man, check it out. No one bothered to ask the doctor if I was really dead. They're too busy strutting, too busy kissing, and I kept fading with only enough breath and sweet consciousness to count their smiles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I heard a voice, a whisper, and it was counting with me. 6, we said. 7, we said. 8, then another voice joined us. 9, then another. 10. You see, I haven't been eating, mama. I've been in a trance. I haven't been sleeping. I've been washing my face off the port of Charleston. There's blood on the fog. I go to the railroad tracks and follow them to the station of my enemies. A cobalt-toothed man pitches pen. States there are toddlers in the rock. I mean, I see why everyone out here got in the big cosmic basket and why blood agreements mean a lot and why I get shot back at. I understand the psycho-spiritual refusal to write white history or take the glass freeway. White skin tattooed on my right forearm, ricochet sewage near where I collapsed into a rat-infested manhood. My new existence is living graffiti in a kitchen with a lot of gun cylinders to hack up. House of God in part, no cops in part, my body brings down to Christmas. The new bullets pray over blankets made from the old bullets. Pray over the 28th hour's next beauty mark. Extrajudicial Confederate statue restoration. The waistband before the next protest post. Hey, by the way, time is not an illusion, Your Honor. I will save your deaths for last. You're witty, Your Honor. You're moving money again, Your Honor. It's only rated one thing. 9 white cops and prison guard shadows reminded me of spoiled milk floating on an oil spill. The neighborhood miles, a new lake for a Black Panther party. Malcolm X's ballroom jacket slung over my son's shoulder, the figment of village, a new news to a new white preacher, all in an abstract painting of a president. Bought slavery some time, didn't it? The tangent screeches of military bolts and election Tuesday cars, a cold-blooded study in leg irons, proof that some white people have actually fondled nooses. And that sundown couples made their vows of love over opaque piece plastic and bolt action audiences. The Medgar of a second is definitely my favorite law of science. Fondle news clippings and primitive Methodists, my arm changes imperialisms. Simple policing versus structural frenzies. Elementary school script versus even wider white spectrums. Artists bleeding in a challenge of watching civilians think. Terrible rituals they have around the corner. They let their elders beg for public mercy. I'm gonna go ahead and sharpen these kids' heads in the arrows myself and see how much gravy spills out of family crest. Modern fans of war. Well, with their t-shirt poems and t-shirt guilt and me having on the cheapest pair of shoes on the bus, I have no choice but to read the city walls, the signs of my life. Guided by teeth goes this country. There is a cow's mouth on the flag. Peculiar Notebook holds street life dear, but the writer is not here. I mean, he's somewhere talking to tombstones about the good old days, or splashing reborn water on his latest face, or wondering how his old gun is doing in the afterlife, wondering how much death trap is in those gas station aisles. It got to be $1 million a day on this concrete island. I mean, new engine in the moon while it never goes down. 72 straight hours of night, at least according to everyone's posture around here. Now, 8:30 in the morning is really 30 minutes to closing. The city shuts down for a sleepy rat race. Elevators shoe shuffle to the nearest heaven. Laugh on rats the whole way up. There's scabs everywhere. In puddles of city and concentrated TV lit warm rooms, the light reveals military fatigue when it hits just right. On the ties that are wrapped around the necks of lazy white guys. I mean, empire is too easy, baby. Chant at the walls all summer if you feel like it. Best wait for a target to move is shooting back. Running for a tree line made of freeways. Wisdom says, against the war machine on Tuesday, you stand no chance, but may we be the last poor people to play it safe. Cow's mouth on the flag. A politician raises his hand, teeth. An oligarch raises his hand, and little kids are not safe outside. You are all high depressed and comrades in function. A 15 minutes of closing and the city has survived another rebellion. We just paying dues by trash fires, not just anybody can set. Hey, don't you love how deadly things whisper in the moment and people kill like feathers fall with everybody screaming inside? The right knows that death is not a matter of dignity, rather humor. In a house that smells like road traces or nuclear percentages on torn stoves, I mean, here life never was. Just lazy matches and manic inhumanity, hands rushing away from life towards stoves. What are we doing here? Surviving for no reason in particular, because nobody will go far today. Nobody will go far tomorrow. Trust me, hell and heaven cannot count. Strange, strange gardens where secondhand clothes play, and concrete wishes to be human so that it could be a cannibal, where they find you drenched, and drains wish to be human so that they can be worthy arms for you to die in. Greet them all, grandson. Prepare for the day when every child is calm, and don't say we ghosts didn't write you a poem. Don't say we didn't dig your life. You remember the shotgun by the coat rack that everybody in the house knows how to use? You remember the tightrope made of needles for walking in between driveways and man-made best friends? Go ahead, grandson. Tune this street again. Never mind, this country kills musicians first. Broken neck night, scarred neck life. I mean, if these walls could write lyrics, they say, what's your angle, angel? Eyes 30, 50 rounds. Pass by a street with no daughters. This street has no sons, just young prisoners of war in a racist city that means to make capital. And we know so much. We know it all. We were stood against walls. Who's on the third cross around here? Cow's mouth, salivating over the street. And that is the story of why we aim at teeth. You know, these little societies wander together like hopeful drops of a virus. Citizen testaments bent on offering me a nation of breadwinners to hold me back like it's a Brinks. I wrinkle the concrete sometimes like flesh. My Martin Luther King permanence turned away from a podium into the reeds, like God is a dangerous twin. Black August to the mountaintop balcony on my bedroom floor. You know, they steal you from the earth itself and suspend you in your broken neck from their foolish euphoria, from the loyalty of their gray superstitions, loyalty of their agrarian reform. I returned to my mother completely disrespected for peeling the heat off of purgatory. They kill poets like me. Walk me away from my poems, never to be heard from again. In this foul industrial complex of bloodlines picked over, picked through, sporting spirits of death, where you devil at least half made, police become a pretty word. I'm reading a lynch mob shoestrings like they were tea leaves, teaching you how to write about cities. It's the 25th century in the mirror, people. Tyranny against your chump. A cubit of needlework spell tuned for the proletariat, the relapse ministry. Talented people curled up in a fetal position next to a diamond dime. Just another service day in the theatrics of tea house fascism, in a bouquet of surveillance cameras, in the poverty of God. No new blue eyes, purposes of water. A newly piloted presidency, a one big shiny coin if you're asking animated capitalism, and then a non-literal voice man killing his white freedom. The deification of hyphens, medicine bread and picture shows, great protesters in LA, Guests of Our Inc., drop kicking Rose in the graveyard. I mean, this DC Mig like a stone 20.5 independent advances despite CIA guideposts, despite non-African past and futures, a metaphorical but not surreal day, and a horn-ridden life form player improvising king. Like a radio prize fight featuring Shango himself. I mean, a real hand will sweep the land of racism. May I return to the ground? And may I make progress with the gun? On our mother Emmanuel, they put on music that evening. A swinging type body language for you to drink with fermented $5 bills. For your body language, some applause. My past stomach lining, neither a good thing nor a bad thing, like being psychic on the way to a lethal injection. It'll sit you down with Lady Day. Lady Day leading youth who surrendered their souls to Africa too soon. Polity thought floating in the cup of water she saved me, accessing my stomach. Accessing the love of the American lynched. Coast leaves, wooden avalanche into the wrist. Our mother Emmanuel, avalanche into the sharp keys, man, that pain. Or that deal you make with pain. A piano makes sense for them. You know, they laying hands on the world gradually, addressing the bending necks on the streets of the north. Travelers sailing in pain, repeating this pain in the north. 10 trigger fingers on that piano, if harmony would have me. Putting 100 fights on every direction offered her. Lady Day, leaning on trees again. Recruiting the countryside itself. Saying, lay your plan out on this lightning. Make your poems the corner pocket of men. I've greeted the blues itself. America may clean my dead body, but will never include me. There goes the poet. Killing without killing. Never mind this painting of your language. May I be a meaningful lynching. A crow's passing. Good and dead by the afternoon. Much love, y'all.
Not gonna.
Oh, straight in the heart.
Yeah.
Wow, now it's taking me out. Thank you so much, Tongo, again, for these amazing poems.
Nós protegemos as abelhas nativas sem ferrão, nós protegemos as aves, nós protegemos os animais, nós protegemos a floresta, nós protegemos a nascente. Sabe o que vocês fazem? Vocês aterram os rios. Sabe o que vocês fazem? Vocês jogam seu imposto nas nascentes. Vocês, burguesia, vocês querem de cara feia pra nós. Vocês acham mesmo que é nós, povos originários, nós, povos indígenas, nosso campo, a nossa reza? Vocês acham que nós que somos uma ameaça? Da onde vem a riqueza da sua família? Da onde vem esse terno caro que vocês compram?
são uma ameaça. Nós, povos originários, vemos com a solução. Nós viemos para dizer a vocês que o Brasil ainda tem jeito. É preciso preservar, é preciso cultivar, é preciso plantar, é preciso cuidar, é preciso olhar para o futuro, trabalhar hoje para sonhar com amanhã. Nós não somos proprietários, nós não somos donos de terra, nós somos guardiões. Nós existimos e existimos por um bem viver, pelo futuro de nossas crianças e das suas também. Porque a única ameaça que existe aqui é a ameaça que vem do mundo ocidental e não dos povos originários. Adiante!
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. Revolution without dancing is a revolution not worth having.